January.
Please rise for silent invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Another week we can say play ball.
Yeah.
Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Ford.
Present.
Councilmember Tremont. Councilmember Stiltner.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bastian.
Yep.
Mayor
Here.
Burnett.
Here. Chase should be here shortly, but we do have a quorum for the workshop. We got 2 items to discuss. One item should take a little bit more time than the other. Shelby, Robin is already in trouble because you did that roll call so well. I know she's listening, so just saying. Council, at your pleasure, I know that we've got a couple people here that probably want to speak to the face mask discussion. We can hear them and have that discussion later, or we can wait. It is a workshop, so we have some latitude with that. And the reason why I say that is it could be quite a while before we get to that part of the discussion with the 2 items, being that we're going to discuss the general fund budget first. So what's your pleasure?
Do we have anybody on there that's
We
waiting
will.
for
We will.
mass discussion, or?
Yeah, we do, but we will later. It's,
I mean,
we can do it in any order you want.
I'm
We can
okay
have the
with
whole
any-
discussion now. My thing is that I'm not inclined, personal opinion, you guys will all decide, but I'd rather have that, the final discussion at the end of the meeting, only because I think a lot of people who've seen the agenda expect that to be at the end of the
Yeah.
meeting, and I want to make sure that anybody who wants to speak to it is given a chance and doesn't miss that opportunity.
Just keep it at the end of the meeting.
Okay. Then we shall proceed. Review of general fund budget. Jake?
Yes, sir. This year's general fund budget, this is the workshop for that. We've not struggled, but we've had some challenges with Workday and getting things in a format that's understandable. It's understandable to our finance department, somewhat understandable to the departments and the department heads, but since it's a change, it's going to be a little bit different for council. So we'd like to walk you through what we have in the interactive spreadsheet and the briefing slides, and kind of talk you through where we are. So without further ado, we'll have Dr. Niels come up and go through the brief. Couple slides to set the tone for what's going on this year, and then we'll jump right into the general fund. We will not be talking about non-general fund.
Okay.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Hope you can hear me okay through the mask here.
Yes.
It's really a pleasure to be here. As Jake had mentioned, it's been a learning curve with the new Workday system and trying to come up with a new budget format, also for not only our budget team, but also for the department heads. So I'd like to thank Lupe and Darlene and the budget team for the great work and Kevin Fall and the great work that they have done in putting this together. Without their help, I could not have done this, so I'd like to personally thank them. And I'm sure you all know Lupe is here in the audience, and so Kevin is available and Darlene via Teams if we need them. As Jake had mentioned, we like to set the goal. This is not the maximum millage rate vote, but the presentations we'll make for you tonight will give you an opportunity to consider what the revenues and expenses are as we projected them, and identify where you think that max millage would like to be, and then on July 28th will be the vote for that. And that is a rate that we cannot exceed, but we can always go, or you can always go lower on that. So again, we want to identify the project priorities. Imperative is safety of staff and assets and citizens. Essential is we lose money if we delay. Important is efficiency and effectiveness, and desirable is nice to have. And you'll see that later on when we look at the 317 capital projects and towards the end of the presentation. Again, it's always, I like to identify and go over the strategic goals, the public safety, infrastructure, quality of life, economic development, fiscal sustainability, and organizational excellence. It's our goal in the city manager's direction that all of the things that we do tie into these strategic goals that you have set so that we can provide the citizens with a budget that is reasonable and one that the council can accept and accomplish these objectives. As last year I provided an economic overview. A lot of this data has come from the UCF Institute for Economic Forecasting. This particular summary is dated April of 2020, so it's pretty recent, and is forecasting economic growth from 2020 through 2023. They're forecasting the real gross state product, RGSP, will not reach pandemic levels again until the third quarter of 21. So they're saying it's going to take about a year for us to get back to where we were before pandemic. Saying that the gross product will decrease by 5.2% this year, and then will increase by 6.7% in 2021. And my revenue forecast that I had provided to you in the last budget session, you may recall that I forecast a pretty significant decline in state revenues. In 2021, I forecast a 15% decline in the state revenue sharing forecast. So it's not as bad as it is this year, but it's still down from what we had normally had in prior years. As far as unemployment, they're forecasting that it'll increase to over 10% in the fourth quarter of 2020. Then it will decrease to 7.6% in 2021 and further decrease to 3.9% in 2022. So that trend is favorable. This information came from Larry Bartlett, the Volusia County tax appraiser. It's showing the countywide increase of construction value of 40.3% over 2019, which is pretty aggressive. A lot of new growth coming to Volusia County. You can see on the arrow there that Port Orange had 62.4 just values, which is the market value of new construction. So we're ahead of most of the pack, not quite as much as Daytona Beach. If you look at a breakdown of taxable value, which is the most important consideration, these are the different components in the county. Residential makes up about 68%. The next largest is commercial, followed by tangible, and that's important, as we'll see in just a minute. The taxable value percentage change from 2019 for Port Orange was 8.3%, very aggressive. So we'll see how that impacts the total taxable value in just a second. So the Port Orange adjustable tax value, historical thing, has been always increasing. We can see that from 20 to 21, the forecast, it went up about $300 million, which is a very nice increase, total overall taxable value. As far as ad valorem, for these purposes, we have projected the ad valorem rate at the current rate, the rate which is we had in FY 2020. So that would bring in at the current rate of 4.5254, just a little over $16 million. As far as the parcel count, there are 31,472 total parcels in the city limits. 24,860 of those are real property. Of those, 15,700 have homesteads on those property. And the net additions, deletions, you can see in the just value is $64 million, which is the market value, taxable value of $56.9 million. And that's the new construction. That's different than what it was last. Those new additions to the tax roll from last year. Breaking that out, the ratios are pretty similar to the county. You can see our residential is 68%, commercial is 22%, and various different degrees lower there. This is a breakout of the different classifications and their just value, taxable value, and adjusted value. And the reason I did this is to show for these individual items what the difference between the taxable value and the just value is. For example, residential, the taxable value is only 38.7% of the market value, and that's due to the homesteads. That's available for your perusal, but the residential one is the one of primary interest for us. Oops. As far as the total parcels in the city, you see in FY29 or FY19 at 31,285, and that increased by 119 to FY20, and then another 68 to FY21. As far as the homestead properties, there was a 233 increase in the number of homestead properties, going from 20 to 21, and the percent of properties with homesteads increased just slightly to 63.1%. One of the concerns, or not a concern, but one of the factors is that there is a law that says the property value increase that's taxable can only be the lesser of 3% or the consumer price index for all urban, which is the CPI-U. And this year that rate was 2.3%. The prior year it was 1.9. So even though our property values increased over 8%, many of those that have the homestead on them, we only see the 2.3% appreciation for taxable value.
Scott,
Oh, sure.
the max rate for non-homestead
10%.
is 10, so we're under that for the
So we're,
non-homestead.
yeah.
Ooh. I know you like to break it down by your individual districts, so you can see that again the 22,676 total broken out in the 4 districts. The number of parcels with zero taxable value is 842, and that means that they have, through their homesteads, either have that down to 0 or there's no tax paid on those number of parcels. Now, in the inclusion in the total average area of residential parcels, there's 862 that are vacant residential, and that's broken out by your districts. District 1 at 255, number 2 at 224, District 3 at 95, and District 4 at 288.
We don't have that slide.
Can you go back to that slide one more
Sure.
second, please?
We can send you a copy of this.
It's on your email.
No, not with me today.
Oh, I see
Yeah.
it down at the bottom, yeah. Vacant
Yeah, the
parcels.
information's at the bottom if
I got you.
if you're missing.
I'm good, Scott, thank you.
Okay. This is a presentation we did last year that I think you found interesting. The rollback rate this year, based on the county's calculation, is 4.2424, a rollback rate, which would give us the same amount of revenue on the same properties this year that we had last year, and that would be 14.8 million. Or from the property values, that if we have to keep the current rate, that would be an additional 1.2 million of revenue for the city, and it's broken out there by 0.5% increases over the rollback rate. At the current rate of 4.5254, the value of a tenth of a mil is 354,000, or just under 354,000. In preparing the budget, the city manager's guidance and council's guidance was to attempt to maintain the same level of service, and we included obligations from the prior year, they call it the turn the year budget, or turn the page budget, that there are certain union pay obligations that we've incorporated. Personnel hired with partial year adjustments. There were several positions last year that you had approved that were partial years, so now in this budget they are at their full year compensation. And then the Axon body camera contract, and Chief Grimaldi can address that, or Jake, or I can if you want to know more about that.
I'll say a quick word. That will be brought to you for discussion. It's under my authority to approve that, but it's of importance that in this budget year, if body cameras is something you would like to get rid of,
No.
so this is just a comment.
Too hard
It's-
to get them in the first place.
it's going to be brought to you on the 21st, but the reason I've included it is because I've heard those comments before, but it's in the budget now. But if for some policy reason or money reason we decide not to, we can back it out. But right now, it's in the budget with my intent to discuss, make sure that in a voting scenario, if you choose not to, you can vote not to. Otherwise, it's under my authority to sign the contract, and I will be doing so subject to budget appropriation. So that'll be another bite at the apple if you decide later on not to approve the budget. We did our, this is the same contract. It's a single source, which is why I'm bringing it to you. It's an expensive single source, but the cost to go to a different manufacturer, buy their software, do the transition, it's just not cost effective, and Axon's given us a pretty good deal, and they are state of the art and known to be the best in the business across the nation. So that'll be coming to you for an in-depth discussion on the 21st. But it is included in this baseline budget.
Okay.
We have identified possible expense reductions. Right now, all staff is budgeted at 100% of staffing. We could move to a different percentage of staffing based on historical vacancy rate, and that would we have schedules that would provide that information for you. And then there's also been some communication regarding the amendment of the fund balance policy. Right now, your policy states that you need at least 30% of general fund operating expenses in fund balance to meet your policy. Currently, we are at the end of last year at 37.5%. There is a significant amount of fund balance there that you have the opportunity, I think, if you change your policy, that you could say that we've met our policy and those funds would be available for operating uses, if you so decide. Another opportunity is to say we'll take some of that and put it in an assigned fund balance for hurricanes or for emergency operations, and then possibly reduce the 30% to some lower amount, depending on what you think is reasonable if you've already provided for an emergency fund, and that would free up some additional operating monies out of fund balance. But those are for your consideration as possible ways to fund different things in the budget.
Okay.
This budget does not include the a la carte menu or any general fund CIP. And August 14th, I think it's the 14th, that we will bring to you the CIP for your approval and concept. Any questions so far?
Save page 24 for discussion later this evening.
As far as the revenues here, I provided a summary that shows the 2020 adopted and the 2021 proposed. Again, the ad valorem tax rates at the current millage rate. You can see in the items in red are all ones that I have forecast a slight decline or a large decline depending on the case. Overall, this would be a $15,000 increase over the monies from last year total, or about a 0.04% increase. And further breaking that down, the ad valorem, you can see, is an 8%. Excuse me, utility service taxes, franchise fees, local government, revenue sharing, admin service fees. For the most part, those are all in lower than they were in the prior year. And you may recall that when we do an ad valorem calculation, the full rate is then offset by 5%. We calculate it at 95%, as the state has recognized that not 100% of the people will pay 100% of their taxes. So they want to make sure that there's adequate money collected based on what you say is necessary for your budget. So when you do a calculation on a taxable value, make sure that you adjust that total amount by 5%, or do a 95% calculation. This is the trend of our revenues over the last several years from 2012. We did have one major spike there in 17 where we had some reimbursements from FEMA, almost $6 million, and the state's a little over $640,000. But in general, most of the other revenues are flat, with the exception of ad valorem. So when you're looking at our ability to control our revenues, ad valorem from general fund is about the only real one that we have control over directly. The rest are either up or down or relatively flat, as you can see from the graph. Any
Now,
questions?
why are we considering our reimbursements revenues? It's just a reimbursement of what we're paying out.
The reimbursement, well, we recognize the revenue when we get it. So otherwise, it sits out there as just pending.
Gotcha.
And there's a slide I have at the end that shows we have about 3.5 million pending FEMA reimbursements from the hurricanes. Any questions? Okay. As far as our ad valorem trends, this is going back to 2012 as well. This is the total ad valorem that the council has approved. You see that we went from 14.8 to 16 million under this particular scenario at the same rate as 2020. And as far as the millage trends, generally it's been on a downward to a flat slope since 2012. And those two, this chart and the one that shows the taxable property values, kind of need to go hand in hand, because if the property values are continuing to rise, you can lower your tax rate and maintain the same amount of revenue, or you can keep the same tax rate and the rising tide raises all ships, so that you would get additional income, which shows that that is the case here. So even though the revenue or the millage rates have been relatively flat, that the revenues are increasing. Questions? Okay. So as far as expenditures, we did provide you with printed copies of these before, but we have made some changes, so there's one for you. All right, then. Part of the experience with the new system is identifying things that shouldn't have been where they were. Right up until just about 5 o'clock, we were finalizing the changes to your reports.
Okay, so this is,
Not a significant change, but I want to make sure that they all agree.
so we should be looking at this new one.
The one we're handing out has got, and this is standard for budget year, right? I think in 5 minutes we get.
You got somebody back there printing them up right now for the change?
So while Jake is passing
When
those.
you sent Jake,
Pardon me?
is this different?
Some of the numbers are different,
Yeah,
yes.
slight changes on some of the numbers, so.
Save your notes.
Well, could you highlight them? It would be nice to get a red line copy, because
I
if
will.
we've used the other ones and made notes, you make it very difficult for us to go back over things. I know this is a workshop, and I know it's a work in progress, but it's work that drives me crazy when I get something 2 minutes before or on the
The
dais.
other one you got.
Understand.
And I don't think that's the first time I've said it.
We would rather give it to you right than late.
I understand. I'd rather get a red line copy with you showing me the changes, so I don't have to go cross-eyed
ma'am.
and go back through all my notes that I've spent an afternoon using.
Understand. Okay, these are, what we have done is to take the expenses that have been identified by the departments and broken them out into personnel, operating expenses, budgetary contingency, capital outlay, grants and aid, and grand total. And each of those, you'll see the FY20 adopted budget, what they're proposing for FY21, and the change between those two numbers. So this is the total for the general fund. You can see the personnel expenses went up $277,000 over the prior year, and that incorporates the compensation changes based on union contracts.
Where did the difference come? In your earlier copy, you got a $458,000 difference, and now we're looking at a $76,000 difference. Did we just shift some of those things around?
That was identifying errors in the data that we had before, and we needed to make corrections.
It's a heck of an error.
And, Council, just quickly, and I noticed this, early on, the first year, or second year, I did budget, and then it went on even through last year, so this isn't a people thing, this is a budget thing. The crew upstairs that does the budget used to be Lisa, Nadia, and any personnel player to be named, and now it's Darlene, Lupe, and Kevin. They're crunching these numbers almost constantly, and they find little burbles and things. Oh, look, I found 20 grand here. Oh, that's not supposed to be there anymore. Things of that nature. We make some decisions on the dais that have second and third order effects. We solve the first order and second order, but then something comes up like, oh my gosh, we never approved that CSO, but the uniforms are still in there, or the bullets are still in there, or the gas money for his car that we didn't buy. So there's little tweaks throughout. So you're gonna see a lot of that, and I think what I'm hearing from Councilmember Ford, and it might be something we think about, Scott, is instead of coming up with the best data at game time, that we snap the chalk line, and any changes don't show up in the brief but are spoken about, and say, look, we found extra money here, and that'll come in the next iteration, instead of sending them real-time data. We're gonna have to kind of migrate into that real-time data thing, possibly, just because it's a change in the way we do business. So we'll work on that. So you're gonna see a lot of numbers differences tonight, because we're always tweaking it. But we'll take Councilmember Ford's request and see what we can do to make that right. Go ahead, Scott.
So then we've gone through each of the departments, so you'll be able to see those. There's also in your data that I gave you, that's out of Workday. Also, we can provide, if you would like, that spreadsheet again. I don't know if that was helpful for you or if it was more confusing. The way that Workday presents the data is that it gives you several subtotals and subtotals and subtotals, and it can get confusing about what the actual numbers are. So if that's of help to you, we'd be happy to provide that. If you like the summary one in the PDF format, we'd be happy to continue to provide that for you as well. So as far as the city clerk, the only change there is compensation, and that is based on the NAGE and an increase in the compensation for the most part. Any questions there?
Nope.
Okay. As far as the city manager department, the compensation increases are again based on the NAGE. As far as operating expenses, the operating expenses and the budgetary contingency are combined for a total of 800 and change.
Council, a note here, as you look at the city managers and you see a decrease in the operating expenditures and a decrease in the contingency. occasionally, hopefully often, as we go through the departments, any decreases are due to efficiencies or actuals. We took a lot of actuals for last year, increased them if they required it, left them the same if they required it, or decreased them if they required it. And so the other thing that's in here in some of these is, because of workday, we took some things out of some line item and put them elsewhere. And so just because the city manager's operating budget went down $597,000 or $597 doesn't necessarily mean that I found $597 worth of efficiencies. It might have been that I put that somewhere else. So we can, when we get down to the nitty gritty of it all, we can tell you where that money's actually going if it's of importance.
In this case, I made this print a little bit too small, but that's composed of a decrease in per diem of about $6,400
Mm-hmm.
and an increase of travel of $7,100. So the decrease and an increase netting out.
Which, by the way, we're finding that a lot of, due to COVID, there's a lot of conferences that are happening virtually. So we've already decreased the amount of participation in a lot of conferences, but as they come up virtually, that will save us additional money, I think, probably in the following year. Okay, Scott.
Okay. As far as code enforcement, excuse me, compensation up $62,000. That's due primarily to the annualization of the two code officers that was approved by council in FY20. And this is the annualization of that plus the compensation increases for the union. As far as operating expenses, there's, I knew I should have made this bigger. It's about a $1,600 decrease in travel. Maintenance costs for increase in the copier of about $2,500. Those are the two major items on there.
Now, with all of code enforcement now under the PD umbrella,
Yes, we do.
why wouldn't we be just showing all this into the PD side of the budget?
We could. We had that broken out as a separate cost center in our system, so we can combine those.
Are we sure there's no duplicity there with the, with any of these expenses?
No, those are two
Different
totally
sides?
separate.
Yeah, we
They're
we
budgeted
kept them
separately.
separate in Workday, so they're separate
Okay.
in the accounting.
So I don't know what the rest of council's pleasure is, but just for future, I'm okay with that all being
Okay.
shown all under the PD, because it's really just another department within the PD now, so as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Because numerically, if you add the two up, it's the same. And
Yep.
it's one department, so you're, you know,
That's easy to do.
yeah.
Well, the only benefit I can see for keeping it separate is that if you ever decide code enforcement should go back under community development, you've already got a clean set of costs.
Well, there's also another thing too. It just occurred to me that code enforcement labor costs are controlled by one union contract. Police is controlled by another union
There's two
contract,
unions.
so there's two different,
Yeah.
Not-
if you
not all-
blend them.
Not all police.
Yeah, all your other
All the
civilian employees
non-sworn
at the
police
PD are the same.
are the same as these.
Okay.
And
CSOs, your civilian.
So we already have some names in
Yeah,
there already.
we're already a mixed bag over there.
Okay.
So we're not necessarily blending to the point where we can't,
No, we can, so from a finance perspective, it sounds like we can. Operationally, we already have. So it's how you want to see it, really.
as long as I can make the cost discernment.
Right.
I don't have a preference. If you want to log it under the department it's actually part of, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, it's a financing of what you want to see.
Okay.
And for that matter, the clerk falls under the city manager's office. We could do that too. We don't have to discuss it now, but that's another one that comes to mind. It's actually a kind of a division of the city manager's office. But in some cities, the clerk is separate.
That one, I think I would prefer to keep it the way it is, because
Yeah.
even though the cost center falls under the city manager's office, technically you run it like a separate department, and you've got
Yeah.
you got a department head who runs it, so,
No, clerk's not a department head.
technically.
Right. I'm just
She
saying,
runs her department,
she's not.
right?
She works for me,
Yeah,
yeah.
technically. But
Yep.
guess what? Everybody does.
Doesn't make any difference to me if it's easier for you one way or another, but I like having the separate spread for the code enforcement to get in the nitty-gritty to see, because we're asked about it so often. And I'd like being able to see the spread as opposed to being one little line item in the police report.
You're asked about the finance piece of code or the operational piece?
This page we're going over.
Yeah, people, I've never had anybody ask me about the finances of code.
No,
but
I like being able to.
You
to
like
see,
seeing,
yeah.
all right,
So be it.
But
We can provide both.
I'm indifferent, to be honest with you.
okay.
Community development, a negative $13,000 on their compensation cost. That's primarily from the delay on the operations support and the senior licensing tech hiring. And in terms of operating expenditures, down $1,700 for a total of $14,728. And part of that operating expense, one of the things that they have done is to delay the cost of the new system that they're proposing. That's about a $50,000 delay in incorporating their new software system for all of their community development activity.
How long are they delaying it? One fiscal year?
Just going into the next fiscal year.
So two,
Be-
21
it'll be
and
20 be in
22?
22.
I'm sorry.
Be in FY '22 for the actual
So they're
implementation.
just pushing it out 1 year?
That's correct, yes.
Well, here's my question for the director there. Let's suppose next year continues to be a slower return than we think, so that we're in the shape we're in now or worse. Can we push it out 2 years?
That would depend on where they are in the contract process, and it's certainly, all of those contracts have a clause in there subject to funding or budget approval.
Ma'am, Tim's typing right now, we can get the answer to that. So, the note is, it's just licensure. So, what we did was, we took the cost of the software program and bought it, and then we took the cost of the licenses and broke it out, and that was in the budget. So we made the call yesterday? We made the call yesterday to wrap the first year of licensing into the contract. So we want a contract for the software program and 1 year of licenses together. So we thus decrease the operational cost of that software program by including the operational cost of the licenses in the first year in the cost of the contract, which is a contract that will be bought with, was it 505? What do we use?
109.
Huh?
109.
109 money.
Well, why wouldn't you do that every year if that produces savings?
Because some of the people that use those licenses will not be building, if I recall, and
I'm sorry, not be
Here,
building
hold on,
like,
hold on.
what does that mean?
Come in.
there he is, come on in.
Come on in. Make some space for me.
Look
Stop
who's
with the
local.
mask.
Tim Berman, Community Development. Sorry, a little bit of delay on the computer. I was a
That's
bit late
okay.
then. But in terms of the, if we have to push out, we've got a couple plans. for that. One of the things that the software license is basically is for the building department function then. So what we're looking is that community development and engineering, which with this budget the license would be for, do a lot with the building permit. So we're hoping to be able to split that license even further to reduce that cost. And also we could phase in the software system in terms of basically the planning and engineering side that would do site plan review could come at a later year. But the main focus we wanted is to get the building side in there, which would be paid with the building revenue fund, which is separate then. So we do have contingency plans if we need to push it back even further on that side then.
Okay, I have two different questions. One would be pushing it out. Are there some economies in the long run to doing it and getting it all at once so that we're being sort of penny wise and pound foolish because we lose some efficiencies? And then why don't you answer that one and then
We'd be buying the software. We've got the money for that already bought then, so we will have the software. The only thing that is basically essentially the license to use it would be what we'd be pushing forward then. So our staff that basically processes the building permits would have that necessary software to use, and the staff that's in planning and engineering, we could push that further out then, and we would not lose any efficiencies and would not cost the city more money to get them on board later on. It would just be that licensing charge then.
Okay, and then my other question is, it sounded like you said the software license comes from a different fund.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any way to shift all of that to the different fund?
It has to be, basically there's the building permit, software essentially does two things. It'll basically do the building permit review, which is the majority of what that will be for. There's also the site plan review and the subdivision review, which is mainly planning and engineering's functions. Since that is not paid for from the building fund then, we have to split it up. But what we are doing is we are carefully looking at each staff member's usage of the software to make sure we've got the exact percentage so we can further reduce that amount then. So it's basically the general fund is just being used at what is, used for site plan and subdivision. So, but we are trying everything we can to basically shift as much as we can into the building revenue fund.
So when you reduce, what you mean is you want to correct the reallocation of
Yes.
how that software is used and put it fine. Okay.
Reduce the general fund, not overall, but.
Well,
the
you're going to
impact of
correct the
general
allocation so it comes out of the right.
fund. Right.
Right,
Money
fund
pot.
basically, which
Yeah.
is basically where the majority of it's used from.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on community development? Okay, my favorite department. See, we have a $98,000 increase in compensation. That's due to the annualization of prior staff, also for the compensation increase. As you may recall, we had the accounting supervisor and the internal auditor position that you approved half years. So we have hired the accounting supervisor. It's Deanie Smith now. She got married, so we're very happy to have her in that position, and we'll be recruiting for her replacement. As far as operations, $27,000 increase, made up of several components. Dues and professional fees for CPE, about $1,000. The DAC, which is our bond agency reporting, is $3,250. We're anticipating a 5% increase on our James Moore audit fees, and that is spread over 4 different funds. The general fund component is an increase of $1,300. And then we have some consulting services for Workday. One of the things that we found in doing the budget is that we do not have the expertise in-house to create all the budget reports and the work. Lupe has spent several hours on with Collaborative to get the budget process to where it is now, and it's not exactly where we need it. But one of our major concerns is that we have not been through a year end yet with Workday. And that training was not very significant, and that's been way back when, last year. So we have put aside $60,000 total, $15,000 of which is for general fund, $15,000 in the 109 fund, and $30,000 in the 401 fund for that consulting. And
Is
that's
there
it.
any way to trim that?
It's possible. We don't have a contract right now for those monies. So we want to make sure that we're not short, because the last thing I want to do is not have our year end go properly.
Again.
You had to
Double-
slide
double
that
it
in
in.
there.
Is that my outside voice?
So a total for the finance department of $120,000 increase, mostly compensation.
And Scott, we should have a better workday number by final budget. But by October,
Oh, yes.
September, we should have, if there's any trimming, man, we'll be able to get that before we go final on the budget in the August timeframe.
Has anybody analyzed what extra it's costing us versus what they told us at the outset? We can't change that as a government, but I certainly think that's relevant if they come looking for our recommendation, because it's the end, it's the story of every software where they go, we're gonna do this. You won't have to have extra stuff, and it never ends up that way.
Absolutely. So we have those numbers. We're not where we need to be yet, so we don't know what that end number is. But and their reply is, like every software that you've been through, is that well if you had done what we asked, you wouldn't have had to pay that cost. We gave you that training 2 years ago. I can't help it you didn't remember it, but we are tracking that, and the other thing that we're tracking is the cost of Navaline should be withering away too. There's some things out there that are preventing us from getting rid of it total, but that old system, as we get smarter on the new system, or buy new programs like Tim's doing, parts of our old system will start to wither away. The utility billing eventually will go away, and things that we've had to maintain in the short term. So those two things we're tracking, and we'll get you some prelim numbers before September, October timeframe.
Yeah, Alan and I and some other folks have had several conversations with other consulting firms that do Workday, and there's quite a few different pricing mechanisms, and so we're aware of those, and we're going to be trying out at least one new one here on some of these just to see how that works, so that we're not tied to collaborative necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
Fire department, an $85,000 decrease in compensation, and that's due primarily to a 5% reduction in the pension contribution ratio. There's not reduction of any personnel. That was fire chief's first concern. So that is the primary reason for that decline in the compensation. As far as his operating cost, down $71,000. That's made up of a couple different components. He moved $11,000 into a project for promotional testing. Excuse me. There's a $74,000 came out of the comparative budget that he'll complete his a la carte items from this year, or from last year in this year. So that's not going forward in the budget. There's been about a $10,000 increase in the cost of medical supplies due primarily to COVID. And we are working with the county to come up with a budget for COVID reimbursement. We have about $45,000 right now that we have in our ZEM 020 project, which is all COVID related.
Okay.
There are two ways of reimbursement of that. One is through FEMA and the other is through the county. The county has allocated $2.2 million to the city to use for COVID reimbursement. And we have a budget that we're preparing to send to the county. And the county finance director, Ryan, is kind of the go-between on that one, and said that he will take a look at all of our proposed projects, and he can say, yeah, I think it's okay, or no, it's not, but he said make sure that it's up to the city, so the county's not going to backstop any decision we make. But we've already moved forward in putting in the touchless water fountains, and they're looking at touchless urinals and bathroom things. looking at waving lights, automatic lights, and those kinds of things have been on almost every finance director's list as far as reimbursable items for COVID. The only key on that is that we need to make sure that we expend those funds and have the product in place by December 31st. That's the current rule on that. So depending, yes ma'am.
Am I looking at the right, we're on fire services,
Yes, ma'am.
correct?
Yes.
Because under operating expenditures, you said they had adjusted 71,000, and the page I'm looking at says 73,208. And then there was another line item where you talked about supplies and expenses that was different than the number I'm looking at. So I want to make sure.
That may be a combination of the operating expenses and the capital outlay. We found that those two go together to make up the net difference total. It may be.
Oh, well,
Scott, excuse me, Marilyn. Marilyn's referencing from this packet. You're
what
Okay.
we just got.
Yeah, but Scott's.
And you just said
Scott's
another
referencing
number.
from this one.
Ah,
Just
Well.
pointing that out.
Yeah, we're on
Thank
a
you.
I'm not sure what the
different
difference is.
presentation.
I'm just saying, he's reading that number off a different page than Marilyn is.
Okay, I just. So are we
that's
using
quite
the more
possible.
current one?
They were both
Both of them are
done at the
current.
same time, so I'm not sure why there's a difference.
Well, this one says 3:12 p.m. on 7/14. And my other one says 5:20 on 7/10.
There was 2,000, you did identify.
Well,
where
you're
that
looking
was.
at that. I did have in my notes, congratulations, fire chief. This was the one that I noticed right away. He was saving money, and I was very impressed.
$2,000 difference.
At 73,
I made a similar note.
6,800.
Yeah, that's
You
good.
just
Good
said
job.
71.
Right, that's what 71 is, so that's a 73 on that one, but that's offset by the, this one should be 6,800, so the two net together. I'm sorry, that is again,
If you
I
can,
can say
Well,
that-
what's the bottom line? For,
it should be 73,208 according to your report,
okay,
and then it should be 6,800 over on the capital outlay. And that's the $2,000 difference.
I have 6,800, okay.
So there's 8,800 on the capital, it should be 6,800.
Yeah, I have
And then
that.
73,208 on your
Gotcha.
Right.
operating
Okay.
instead of 70.
Okay,
That's easy.
so then below the line, total expenditures should be a savings of 165,525?
That number is correct.
Okay,
The total is correct.
okay. So they've reduced their budget by 1.68, 1.7.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that's the correct page.
And
Thank
again,
you.
some of that is just because the project, we're comparing what we had in the operating, or in the approved budget in 20 to the
Yeah.
operating request this year. So if there was something in the 20 budget they're not doing this year, that will show a reduction in expense. So that's,
Well, that's okay. I'll
Right.
claim victory if it's reduced money.
You said the 85,000 is a reduction in the pension contribution?
basically, it's 89,000 then offset by a slight payroll increase due to compensation. So that's a 5% reduction in the pension contribution percentage for the city portion. And that's based on the last actuarial report.
Oh, so that's the recommended contribution went down?
Yes, 5%.
On an $8 million payroll, that's real money.
However, it's gonna go up next year because we're gonna see those COVID-related probably investment losses. So would it be wise to
No.
reduce it and increase it next year, or
No.
keep it steady this year? We're gonna see
don't
we're
wanna
gonna
get-
see an increase in that. It might go down 5% this year, but it's gonna go up 10 or 15%
Well,
next
my
year, and we have to make it.
Right, but my recollection at our last meeting, which was either May or June, Frank Nguyen, the finance guy, because we had changed one of, I'm gonna use the word instrument, but it's probably not, one of our funds, it actually was a very good decision because it's been less volatile.
Yeah.
So while there was a drop, my recollection is, it was better than it could have been.
Yeah.
And all things considered, we appeared to be in a pretty good place. It changed the city contribution only a little bit.
Yeah.
So Frank indicated he was hopeful
Yeah.
that by the end of the year there would be a drop, but it would not be as
Well, I get
disastrous
that, but
as-
they, you know, they create that contribution based on a
Right.
8% return or
Right,
7.25 or 7.35. They're not gonna meet that.
Right.
So that contribution is not gonna be less, it's gonna be higher.
Not necessarily. You got two things working to our advantage. One is that we're also working on a 5-year moving average. That's to create exponential smoothing so you don't have those shocks from one year to the next. The other thing working in our favor is traditionally we've also overfunded by paying the contribution on our budgeted amount versus our actual payroll. So we've already been overfunding it based on what we're required to do anyway. And even if we take the lower amount, we'll be overfunding it again this year,
Just by
just by
a
the
bit
accounting
smaller.
practice that we've
Okay. 'Cause
already incorporated.
It'd be, you know, prudent to pay those down as we
And we are.
can, so that, okay. All right.
So I'm not really interested in worrying about next year. I'll worry about next year since we
Okay.
have those safeguards already in place.
All right.
And Dr. Scott, tell me if I'm wrong.
You're correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Have another question. Are we still on fire?
Are we on fire?
We're on fire.
Before you change, something that we have this year that we've never had before is the ambulance revenue. So how is that gonna play in? Could that be used to fund the service for next year and/or increase the rescue service to 24/7? Or how will that work? And what are our numbers on that AMBO revenue? If I remember correctly, I think Chief said it was roughly close to 30, they're averaging about 38,000 a month.
That sounds about right.
And I think we're about 8 months into that, so that should be roughly
We're about
305.
312,000 if I remember, something like
Yeah,
that.
304 maybe. So how will that play into next year?
Depends on whether the council approves 24/7 or if you're gonna stay at 12/7.
Okay.
If you're at 12/7, then that revenue will be about 350, 360.
Okay.
But that's not a break-even proposition.
No, I understand that, but it stays in that budget to help
No,
fund
it
the
doesn't go to fire,
service,
it goes to the general fund budget.
but it can be
general revenue.
used to,
Oh, yes.
because part of the budget's paid from general, so we can use
It's already
it.
in the revenue.
Yeah.
To-
It's already
okay.
in the estimated revenue of the budget.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that moving forward could help pay for that service moving forward, no matter what we decide, 12
That's correct.
or 24-hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
So remember, Drew, remember all the lines where it said it's relatively flat? And
Yes,
so one of those in there is
the
the
AMBO
revenue
revenue.
from the AMBO.
Okay,
So if we increase the revenue, that flat line, if it was skinnier, would look less flat.
I got you.
So,
Okay.
and that would be, you know, when Scott, in the slide that says it has the revenues.
Yeah.
One of those numbers would be higher by the amount.
I
that-
got
that that right there. One
Okay.
of those numbers would be higher by that amount that we make more than 360. But we budgeted, remember the first year we budgeted for Scott, what was it? What did Tracy budget, like 60, 50 grand?
Yeah,
She
it
was
wasn't much at
nervous
all.
all get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having come from evac.
Yeah.
And seeing
Yeah, and
the nasty-
and we've done a lot
and
better.
We hit it, so
Okay.
19, we budgeted.
I think we all knew that was an ultra-conservative estimate at the time.
It was, so.
Okay.
and then-
Now we
and then
have
this year,
experience.
We got 2 years,
Yeah.
we'll have 2 full years, and we kinda look historically, and, you know.
Yeah.
We got COVID, but, I don't think ambulance services, it might be slowing down a little bit, but
Yeah.
people still get sick and need rides to the airport.
Oh, yeah, they're still going to the hospital.
So,
Okay.
Human resources. showing an increase of 28,643. That's an annualized position for the trainer, and then comp increases. As far as reductions, excuse me, ADP, reduced service requirement. Hiring costs are lower, and tuition reimbursement's been reduced 5,000. So that's a total of about $6,900 reduction. Capital is the 4,000. That's just been moved out from prior year. So the total net reduction or increase in human resources is 17,769.
So a note in human resources that I got from Jamie earlier. We talked a little bit about Workday and efficiencies. When we picked up Workday, we got rid of two systems, NeoGov and WorkBright. So NeoGov and WorkBright decreased the HR budget, but the difference does not include an increase. We threw, last year we had a non-departmental department, if you will, where a bunch of money was. Well, Workday doesn't have non-departmental. So we had to put tuition assistance somewhere, and we gave it to Jamie and HR. So the tuition assistance program, which I think is 20, 25?
It was 25, it's now 20.
Yeah, it was 25, it's now 20, is now in that operational expenditure. So she's got some additions and subtractions, but net, she's about $7,000 in operational difference. I'm not going to call it savings.
And again, Councilwoman Ford, you may notice the operational and the capital. It should be a total of 10,874 together on your report, I believe.
It is,
Yeah.
thank you.
The city attorney here, Matt, do you want to do your own?
How much did you cut?
Primarily difference there of $12,000 is the split funding of the paralegal position with risk. That's the bulk of that change there.
Well done, Mr. Jones.
And no change in operating expenditures. For sure of interest to the council is the mayor council department. There is a reduction of $5,800 in compensation, and no, we're not reducing your salary. There's a council person that elected not to take the medical, and so that savings is there.
That would be me.
Thank you.
What are the increases? Holy moly, because just as I complimented the fire, I said, oh my gosh, I need to spank council, and I'm one of them.
Primarily, it's a legislative service contract for $40,000. There's various customers' dues and things for $3,000, and then travel and per diem up $2,200.
So legislative service
so the real-
contract's not new though.
Legislative contract went up.
Hold on. Tell the real story. This is money that was in the non-departmental, that now we need a place for.
So, sorry.
I didn't
These are
want it
not-
to city manager's budget.
These are
Now I
not
gotta
new
decrease.
expenditures.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
These
So-
are not new expenditures.
No,
same expenditure,
no.
different.
Okay.
And,
Pretty slick.
you know, after we want to do the lobbyist contract and vote on it, it was like, okay, I'll put it in your budget. So that's where it is, by golly. Thank you.
Okay, and then you said there was an increase in travel,
Yes, so $2,300.
and that would show under operating expenses?
Yes.
Or
A
discretionary?
combination of travel and per diem.
Okay, here's my question. And I would just ask council to consider this. Not as many of us traveled up to Tallahassee, and then certainly when COVID hit, we didn't. So the question I would ask ourselves in a tight budget year, do we think our being there or not being there with such a presence, did it have a big return on what we ended up bringing home? I don't need an answer now, that's just a question I would throw out there.
I would say the answer was yes until the governor's veto pen came across. But more than that is that the legislative session always carry, each one of them has its own character. Each one of them has its own, what spins out of it in any given year, you don't know until it's almost honest. And sometimes it is reactionary, and I'd like to be able to have that flexibility to react. And if we don't end up not using those travel dollars, then they flow into our fund overage for use in the following year. But at least we have the flexibility to respond to surprises and things like that if we need to.
Well, I guess my answer to that would be, yeah, but saying that it's there, we're still tacking that dollar on to our taxpayer. And I just as soon not tack that dollar on to the taxpayer this year. And if we decide there's something urgent, then we look at our contingency that we've got to make a decision
Yeah, I got it. That's easy.
on a case-by-case basis that we want to spend, take $2,000 from our, unexpected fund balance that is sitting there, and yes, we're going to use it for a regular expense during the year. I hate to charge our residents even a penny more if we don't need to.
Well, the thing is we've used it every year. So it is a usual and customary expense. We've used that fund every year I've been on council. It's not something that is discretionary to the point, well, we may use it this year, but not next year. We have used it every single year. The amount will vary, but the fund itself, we've used it.
Yeah, but I'm not saying
It is usual and
got it,
customary.
but the expense went up another $2,300. Let's roll back to what we had in the previous year. And then if we think it needs to go above that, then we
I
can
have, I have no
just-
problem keeping it what we've done in the past,
That would be
as
my
long as we
argument.
have the flexibility.
Just,
So something that, just keep on talking about, this would not, the 2,300 doesn't give you additional trips up there. It's the, pretty much the cost, I believe the cost of the hotels is getting more expensive. So I think it would be either fewer people or
Is
or
that
less
why you
trips.
have us staying further and further away every time we go?
Yeah, pretty soon we'll be in
Be a county
Gainesville
over.
for a Tallahassee trip, right?
Whose idea was it to put the capital away up there?
Yeah.
Any more questions there? Okay. This non-departmental, Jake mentioned that we are trying to move out of that department, so this is areas that we still don't have any particular department to attach. Excuse me. And so the budgetary contingency, that is the 170,000, that's down. We got 36,000 on grants and aid, that's down a little bit. Those are mostly clearing accounts.
Where have you moved on to?
Sorry, what?
Scott? Where did you move on to?
Non-departmental. Should be the next slide.
All right.
I don't have,
Let's,
yeah, this one.
Yeah.
But I don't see that number you just mentioned.
192
Far right.
for the total.
192, 997, I'm looking right now.
190,
Two
Four?
minus, 192 minus.
192, 997.
I don't see it. Am I on the wrong?
Is it a different one?
Marilyn, this one,
She's gonna look
Second
at it
page.
different.
this.
It's on the total on the next page.
Oh, he's on this one. No, that's the one. But he's not reading off of here? Yeah, but these numbers should match in here.
I'm not looking right now.
Oh, well, that's where I was looking before. Okay, let's see.
On the second page in non-departmental, there's a very small one line, I believe, or maybe two lines.
Okay, so these numbers don't match these numbers.
They should. We checked them all. On the totals. So on the second page of that one, there's one more page to the non-departmental.
Let me look here.
Oh,
on
that,
the
this got
PDF printout.
cut off, the smaller one.
Yeah, but no, I'm just looking at, this is budgetary
And that's got the same number.
contingency, grants and aid, grand total.
You have it, man?
23, 248, 426. Okay, I've got it.
Good. Parks and Rec, 99,505 for an increase in their, I think that's a comp increase. And the annualization. Under operational, they have a couple items of roof replacements of 15,000, and then a court resurfacing for 20,000, and then the miscellaneous for about 3,500. That makes up the majority of their operating cost.
Now, this page says $31,000 difference here, this one says $27,000 difference.
No,
Oh, wait a second.
no, the difference is 27,005.
And that's one again where the
Okay.
43,005, there's $2,000, should be $2,000 higher in the capital equipment, should be $2,000 less, so those two are combined. So the total is 27,005. Now the roof replacements, those are repair and maintenance, those are not new roofs. Okay. Next one up is police. Total of 78,336 on their personnel. That's comp increase and annualization of positions. As far as their total, we talked about earlier about the Axon body camera contract. That's almost $51,000. We moved from the contingency part to the operations side, the $55,000 for the Halifax TNR program. There's $6,500 for speed sign and other software maintenance. The uniforms, there's increase of $5,000 for uniform costs. Equipment inspection for, excuse me, for the sound meter and the copy machines and miscellaneous items. Under other, there's $4,400 increase for printing and dues and medical supplies and postage. And then a decrease of $19,000 for Johnson Controls, and that's based on the surge protection that was put in this last year. And so now when they have lightning strikes, they don't have to call out the Johnson Control folks for a service call, but they're not having those now. Then the reduction in the capital of $55,000 that moved from capital to operating. So a total of $156,000.
Dr. Mills, could you go over again, what's under discretionary operating expenditures?
When we moved into Workday, we have two components. One, there's discretionary, which means the department head has a capability to manage that.
Right.
And then non-discretionary are the items that come in from allocations, like building maintenance, the IT allocation.
Right, but what's under discretionary? Because that's an increase of 133,000. That's a big number.
That's probably the customers, under contractual services, the Axon one, contractual services,
Okay.
Halifax. Software would be under discretionary.
Other software, you mean for the computer?
Yep. 6,500.
That's for, if I recall, that's for, and Chief's delayed, but might be bopping in here any minute. But
He's here.
if I
He's here.
And there it is. That's for speed signs, right? Software for speed signs?
Yes, sir. Good evening. Tom Grimaldi, Chief of Police. That's for the electronic speed signs,
Okay.
the maintenance, and the other maintenance software we have for all of our other databases and such. But that's the big one.
I'm sorry, what is the big one?
That's the big one is the.
Oh, the speed
The
signs.
speed signs.
Okay.
And yeah, that's the major part of that, because we had 2 additional ones that we just purchased through a grant.
Okay, yeah, I remember that.
Same one? No, you got a different one. I do.
6500.
Yeah.
These are for 2 new speed signs
We
or maintenance of them?
We purchased
The-
2 with a
We purchased 2,
grant.
but now we need the maintenance of it. We purchased 2 through a grant, which we
Right.
got.
Okay.
Because
This is
we
for
started
the-
doing that about 2 years ago with the electronic speed signs. They seem to be a big hit with our residents. We see a decrease as well. It does work, so we want it more. There's a maintenance cost to that.
Although I did have a comment from residents that it's really been backing up traffic on Countryside.
Because they're
Give
going the
it to
speed
them.
limit.
Make
now.
it
The other
Yeah, I
option
wanna
is
see the
just to let it go,
issue.
right? So we really don't want to do that either, so.
It was in jest.
Any other questions for the chief? while he's doing it?
Okay.
When they did the conversation about having code.
I did hear that, and so I was a little confused by that conversation on the code and separating. I wasn't sure if you're talking about the actual budget, or if you're just talking about the presentation that Dr. Niels makes with the charts. If we're talking about the budget, I really truly want to keep them separated. We did that, we made it a separate cost center purposely, because we can manage it better. We can manage costs, we know where our expenditures are going.
That's fine.
I think Councilmember Ford made a good comment, although I don't think it's going to be reassigned
Yeah.
anywhere else. But that was one of our challenges when we took it from community development. And it's not a knock on community development. It was just extrapolating those expenses out of there. And it took some time. It took us really almost 2 years. A lot of it was meshed together. It really was not a good accounting system of being able to look at it and say, these expenses go to code. We couldn't do that. And so I really want to keep them separate from the PD. I get what you're saying, Councilman. Looking at it, it's all under one big umbrella.
For the
Um,
sake
and
of
maybe
our
the
presentation, I
presentation-
think Dr. Niels can do that,
Right.
but if it makes it easier to manage those dollars,
I
then yeah,
really-
absolutely.
Yeah, I really truly want to keep it as a separate cost center, and we can manage it better. I do feel that way. So
That works
anything
for
I
me.
can do for the presentation to make it easier, we will work together to make
Very
that
good.
happen, but I really want to keep that cost center separate.
That's fine.
Well, Chief, do you have animal control as a cost center? Well, we may not see it, but do you keep it separate?
We try to, we keep it through spreadsheets. When we went with Workday, we tried to keep certain things separate.
Mhm.
Animal control, I will tell you, in my old department where I was a chief, we kept it as a separate cost center, so to speak, but for those same reasons I'm talking about. But it was a little bit larger than the 2
Mhm.
officers we have here, so there's some more reasons for that. But we do keep spreadsheets on that and try to pinpoint those costs and expenditures
Because I
separately.
guess I'm thinking we're gonna be asked at some point about that, or we're gonna wanna know that, and so whatever helps
Yeah.
you, I'm good with.
Yeah, especially I think this year with all the things we're going
Yeah.
on,
Mhm.
so.
Okay.
Let me make sure so operating expenditures and discretionary both went up by exactly the same amount? Are those numbers correct?
That's what I was telling you on those reports, you have several totals and subtotals, and it's the same number repeated 2 or 3 times.
I'm sorry, so is the number good?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
okay,
it's
it just sort of,
The totals start at the top and they go down to a subtotal, then another subtotal, and then you have the detail. It's kind of confusing. We're trying to strip that out when we give you these reports, but that's a Workday format report.
but operating is different than discretionary operating,
And
right?
discretionary is a component of operating.
Okay,
it's just a
so is
hierarchy.
the number that I'm looking at, I see 133,204 twice. That's what got my attention. It's So is it really 266, 408
No.
between the
You
two?
think of a hierarchy, it's got operating expenses, then you have discretionary, and then you have non-discretionary, and those all add up, so you've got a total for discretionary.
Okay.
Which is part of
I
the total
gotcha.
budget. So very confusing, that's why I was concerned to give you those reports.
I gotcha. Do
One
they
other-
indent or color or anything that could help you see that it's a
We're working on
subtotal?
better reporting.
Okay.
One other thing before I leave is when we were talking about the software for the maintenance costs, and I told you about the speed signs, that is the biggest component of that. But
Okay.
another part of that was we moved about $2,000 in that out of that 65. We moved it from another line item that it didn't fit. It was for some of our software product maintenance, but for some reason it was under books and subscriptions. It doesn't fit there, it fits better here, so it's really just a move, it's not
Little
an
cleanup.
increase. It's a little cleanup, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. In that regard, another thing that you may notice in there was a communications expense as a summary item, and then we broke that out into communications, internet, and city phones. So you'll many times see on communication expense a big negative, but then there's a positive down there on city phones or the internet. And we did that to better break out the expense control on those. And finally,
Public Works.
not least, but last, is Public Works. And Lynn is here if you'd like to address your, or you want me to do it?
Keep going.
Lynn was thinking you were on a terrific roll.
Butter.
doing a great job.
I would like to let her shine.
Lynn Stevens, Public Works and Utility Director. So there are a couple differences in our numbers. So we did reduce our overtime, and we also had some more veteran employees that have retired or left our employment, which is why we have a decrease in our personnel costs. We sharpened our pencil on some of that overtime cost and tried to reduce it. When it comes to the operating expenses, of course, we're expecting a slight increase in the grounds maintenance. We also have discovered that we have about 4 wooden bridges around the city that have not been maintained properly, so we have included $25,000 in that line item. To do the inspection on our wooden bridges, we've solicited some pricing. So we know it's gonna run anywhere between $22,000 to $25,000 for that. Some other things that we have there, we're purchasing some portable generators to replace some old equipment that we have that maintains the traffic lights during emergency operations. So that's another thing that we have going on. We've also had an increase in the amount of maintenance on some of the smaller equipment around our facilities. So we've increased that maintenance based on actual expenditures this year. I think I did talk about mowing. We're expecting a slight increase in CPI. We also have some additional areas. We just did some major changes out at the fire station. It adds a little bit to our mowing there and maintenance. We also have the area in front of the electronic sign that used to be maintained by Home Depot that next year is going to fall under us. And then once we're done with the Dunlop median, that will increase some of our costs on maintaining the median with the additional shrubs and things like that. We've also increased our level of service when it comes to some of the palm tree trimming. We went from once a year to twice a year.
Questions?
Tell me again about the sign. Home Depot maintains the sign or just that vicinity?
So there was a agreement with when they built Home Depot that they maintain that area, and community development has been working on a new development agreement with them. And part of that agreement would be the city being able to replace our electronic sign out there, and we would take over maintenance. We maintain one side of the entrance, we don't maintain the other. Home Depot maintains the other side where the sign is. We maintain the
And
other
we
side
can
by
tell.
the annex. So we're gonna be taking over that maintenance of that space.
Why are we, what's the point of doing that?
It's the entrance to our city, and we thought that we would be better served making it the way we want it, not asking Home Depot to make it the way they want it. It was a discussion we had with council probably 4 months
Mhm.
ago
Yeah, there's a little
as we started it.
consistency. Okay.
I was gonna congratulate you, but the numbers have really changed a lot. And no, it's not that bad, but I just wanna make sure, Dr. Niels, because the one that you sent us, or that I got maybe from the manager earlier, it looked like, well, actually, I thought your math was wrong, because the note I have to myself is, under, you had a plus 22,000 in expenses and 11,000, 22 increase, and then you saved another 11,000, so you're really only up 10,000, 11,000, which was like 0.3% increase over the prior year. But as I'm looking at this, this is really a 0.6%. So I guess I'm just, and if you, that's what I'm trying to go back through what I originally saw versus this. So what happened was, is when you started looking at the numbers, you noticed some big differences, like, oh yeah, it really should be this cost, which is more than what was shown on the original. Is that correct?
So there was $13,000 that we originally thought needed to be in a la carte for the replacement of the generators or the traffic signals.
Uh-huh.
And it should not. It should have been in our operating expense.
Okay.
So we added the additional $13,000 there.
Which-
And I believe that occurred yesterday after discussions with finance.
Okay, so if you were 10, 11 off originally, and then now 13, 24, yeah, that
Yeah.
would put, okay, that explains it. Thank you.
Anybody else?
And the
Thank you,
same
Lynn.
thing, for council, the same thing occurred in Parks and Rec with, a few things that they had a la carte, and we're like, no, they're not, they're ongoing expenses, so we threw them back in, and we discussed those earlier.
Replacements and the coat resurfacing.
Yeah, I didn't really have
Right.
a problem with that.
Thanks, Lynn.
Okay, that concludes the individual departments. I put together a summary. So the revenues at the 4.5254 is 40,662,000. Total general fund expenses as presented to you tonight is 40,723,000. So as the budget sits right now, there's a net shortfall at the current rate of just over $61,000. So close to a balanced budget,
Kind of,
kind of.
because we're talking about current rate, not rollback.
Yep. Remember on that slide, the rollback would take over $1 million out.
Yep.
1.2, yeah.
Okay, as far as a la carte requests, there's approximately $640,000. Lupe has a little bit different number, but I went with this one because it's a little bit higher, just to give you what we think is the maximum amount. It's broken out by department, and there's detail on what those things are that we can provide you. So if the council at the current rate wanted to fund all of the a la carte, at a tenth of a mil at the current rate, that's about $350,000 per tenth of a mil. So to fund all of the a la carte would take about 1.8 tenths of a mil, or instead of 5.254, it'd be at 4.7. And then as far as last time we had our CIP meeting, we had identified the capital 317 fund CIP projects. That's just under $2 million additional capital request. And that's broken out by department. So, just a note down there, you can see the total imperative is about 546,000. And then the note on the public works fence replacement, it's 30,000, but shared equally by the 311, 317, and the 401 funds.
So what are the a la carte requests?
Lee, do you have that report with you? I don't know if I brought that with me or not.
Because honestly, the dollars don't mean a lot to me until I know what they're attached to.
Hang on just a second. So for finance, other supplies and expenses, there's $8,200. Excuse me, that's broken out into, I can tell you. There's $1,000 for a new laptop for Cynthia and monitors. New touchscreen for the community development, soon-to-be finance conference room to replace the old one that's there. There's $700 for the exam fees for Allison Sylvester for her Certified Government Finance Officer credentials. And then Florida Benchmarking Corporation, $3,000 for the membership fee. So that's finance for the $8,200.
Here's my thing, council, tell me if y'all are with me. If you're giving me a la carte choices on expenditures, I really need a detailed breakdown of what those are, item-wise by department. And I kinda gotta be able to chew on them a little bit and ask questions, and if we don't quite have those ready tonight,
Sure.
then
We'll
it
provide
really
them.
doesn't do me a lot of good to talk about a la carte at all until we have all of that. We might have to revisit that, but I can't talk about dollars without knowing what they're attached to.
I would agree.
And if we have to revisit that later, so be it, but I don't see the sense in it.
We wanted to make sure we got you the operating costs first.
That's fine,
and this
I
was-
understand. But, like I said,
Not
without,
available.
without knowing what they're attached to,
I agree,
there's no judgment call to make. Can't do it.
I agree.
Not tonight, anyway. You had a couple slides left, and then I wanted to go back.
Okay. Just as a reminder, this was the total capital request by department in the CIP. We'll address that again in August. And finally, had some good news. The FEMA has identified a increase in our balance due for administrative costs for IRMA. So that now is total available of $3.5 million, and that's about an additional $700,000 that we have coming for reimbursement.
Scott, are we showing that already in our fund balance as an accounts payable? So that doesn't factor into, I'm sorry, as an account receivable. So that doesn't factor into the 30% we currently have. The
That's correct.
30% is actual assets, not expected assets.
That's correct. Just
So-
like grants, we don't recognize the revenue until we actually receive it.
Okay, right, so.
But Allison did tell me that apparently FEMA is trying to get these things processed quickly, because now they've got this whole slug of COVID things coming through. So they'd like to get those off of their books, and so that may mean we get them sooner rather than later, but no guarantees.
Not as long as the state is gonna continue to re-underwrite it after FEMA's done.
Yep.
That's why we're still waiting on Matthew.
So council, that concludes my presentation, and be happy to go back to whatever slides you got, I think 24, I think you said?
Yeah. You had some options for us, and there we go. Baseline budgets, you had some expense reduction options for us. Budgeting staffing at 100% for now, can move to a percentage of full staffing based on a historical vacancy rate. Generally speaking, we know we always have a vacancy rate, and this, but I don't want to go to that number. Can we go to something in between 100% and what the vacancy rate per department is?
So, Scott, I'd like to, you know that diagram that I showed that we talked about?
Mhm.
I have a thing up there. The numbers are a little off based on the numbers we just showed. I would like to kind of show council where I think we can go with that. Rough order of magnitude. Let's just talk about the rough order of magnitude stuff right now.
Can you increase the font on that chart?
Yeah, I can, unfortunately. This was a back of the napkin thing. Rollback is 4.2424. I think Scott mentioned that earlier. We have a current rate of 4.5254. I had a budget request earlier today that was about 140K difference, and now we're at what? 70K. So that's already gotten smaller. Based on some conversations I've had with the police chief and that Scott Stiltner had mentioned before, and you all had kind of opined about in the past, is the inability to fully staff the police department. We're not there. Recruiting has slowed. We're picking that up right now. We're starting to shake the bushes outside the immediate area where we've always been, but we're starting to aggressively recruit. But we don't think we can get all our recruits in FY21, given the situation, given the, is Academy teaching again, Chief?
It's anticipated in August.
So we're basically trying to buy cops or cops from elsewhere. You know, Chief and I are gonna do a road show with the military bases around here and as far away as we can sneak. I have some contacts, but our recruiter, our new recruiter's Andre Fleming, a prior Navy guy, so he's got some contacts, but we're gonna try to pull some strings, get some folks recruited. But we imagine with some of the police for 1 year and some other savings in personnel, we could probably save about $410,000 right there. This decrease has already gone from 140 to 70, so that might be an additional $70,000 of savings, which would bring your millage rate, before we talk about a la carte and the CIP, down to 4.4054. So probably slightly less than that now because there's an extra $70,000 in there. That's probably around 480. So that's what we're looking at. The a la carte, these were old numbers, but he just briefed you on what the a la carte cost is. That would be above that cost, and then the CIP at 1.98, if we chose to fund it all, would be up here.
Okay.
The advantages are that the 317 CIP, Chief, I'll turn this around, or you want to come over and take a look if you want. That's what we talked about earlier. But the 317 CIP, you can fund with fund balance, whatever you choose to approve in the CIP. And that 317 CIP, Scott, did we figure out what 7% is? And so, not saying you got that to mess with, but there's $3 million above your fund policy right here, your fund balance policy. So, 1.8 million, you could fund it all if you chose to. A la carte, you offset that based on current policy by not funding any of it. or raising the rate from whatever we can get it down to with this, personnel, adjustment. And that's, I would say, based on the work that staff's done, other than things that, Councilmember Ford mentioned, we can find you some, I call it decimal dust. I can find you $1,000 here, $2,000 there, $3,000 there.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna say it's not gonna amount to anything, but you're not gonna go, oh, great, I'm glad you did that. You're gonna see this 4.4054 go to 4.4535, maybe, I don't know. But it's not gonna be a heck of a lot when your millage rate
It's
is.
still the taxpayers' dollars.
I'm not saying we're not gonna do it, I'm saying if you're looking for a number,
That's not where to find it.
that's not where to find it.
Okay.
Mhm.
It's gonna be, before we built the budget, is no drop in service. That's another option to get these costs down. Maybe not an option you wanna entertain, but it is an option. One of the options I didn't write down, I know the mayor has at least mentioned it, is that, you might wanna mess a little bit with your fund balance policy. Not recommended from a government financing, position, not recommended because it takes care of the bill this year, but it doubles it next year. So not only is your fund balance start to decrease, and you owe the fund balance, but now your operating budget is that much bigger next
It
year.
goes up.
Mhm.
So, not recommended. I believe I can get you 4.5, something below 4.5254, approve some of the imperative a la carte items, not all of them, and use your fund balance to fund most, if not all, of the CIP, and have a successful year. It's gonna be tight, but I can get you somewhere below 4.5254. As you saw, I think the number was, excuse me, I'm gonna take a sip of water. I think the number in additional revenue from ad valorem was $254,000.
That's personnel cost.
What was the increase in,
Ad valorem,
yeah,
$1 million, from rollback, or from?
New construction.
new construction?
About
250,000, so going rollback and getting $250,000 in the additional in the budget isn't gonna pay for, the NAGE increase, and I think the Axon body cameras. Those two things eat up that $250,000 right away. So I can get you there, but I can't get you there with the current service level. We'd have to cut, something, and allow that service to go.
So rollback, we can't not even meet our obligations.
Not necessarily.
Not current obligations
Think-
as
okay.
they are.
Okay.
That's
That's good enough.
We can get rid of stuff, we can, Lynn, I didn't bring that piece of paper, we can stop mowing the county's lawns to the tune of $300,000. But with that comes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, ugly Williamson, ugly Clyde Morris, ugly Nova.
Oh, yeah.
We already get calls when the county doesn't
Yep.
mow on our
People who
schedule.
live here don't know what we cut and what they cut. They just know it's
Absolutely.
not cut in our city.
No doubt, and so the answer also can't be, well, that's a county's problem. I don't care, as far as I'm concerned, it's your problem, Jake, go
Yep,
fix it.
and
So
it's
then-
on Clyde,
Then we
yeah.
nag the county to, and they respond, don't get me
Okay.
wrong, the county
Mhm.
responds. So that's kind of the scenario from the big picture, and where we gotta go.
Well, let me explain my position on the use of fund balance. Generally speaking, and you guys know that my background and my education, generally speaking, the rule is that you don't want to use fund balance or your savings account for recurring expenses on a normal given basis, and I understand why Jake does not recommend doing that. I think we've got a couple things going for us. And the reason why I would be more liberal at using fund balance this year, and that's because, generally speaking, we maintain that fund balance because we can handle emergencies with that fund balance. Well, guess what? We're in one. I think it's absolutely suitable to consider using that to get us into the following year and maintain service levels where they're expected. I think we can do that with our excess, particularly knowing that it may be 1, 3, 5 years out when we see some of these other dollars coming at us, but there's $3.5 million of hurricane dollars out there. And just running some numbers, I think the actual number of where we should be at in a policy is actually around 26 to 27%. So I don't have a problem with having 30% as a policy. You got to have some buffer there. You got 10% contingency in that. We're at 37%, and we've got other dollars out there that we don't have on the books. We had an excess at the end of last year of $836,000 because we managed last year well. When we don't have emergencies, that's the norm. That's the expectation. I am, generally speaking, more favorable to using fund balances to get us through a year like this based on the nature of it and being able to maintain service levels without adding anything. I don't think that personally, because of what we're going through, that it is inappropriate under these circumstances. But that's just my opinion. Just wanted to put that out there for everybody's thought.
Well, and I think to that note, Mayor, that at the beginning, what Scott was talking about with revenue projections, those are projections based on this same emergency carrying and lagging for a little while until that comes back to normalcy.
We don't know what we don't know.
Right, but we do know that the state of Florida is in a growth boom. Projections are that for that to continue. This too shall pass, hopefully, right? And so those revenue projections are going to recover back. In fact, some of the stuff, I know that Scott's building a budget based on certain assumptions, but some of those assumptions are already looking better in terms of like jobs coming back quicker, more people getting back to work, less folks filing for unemployment, things like that. So there are some, I think we need to be conservative. I think they're building it the right way, but I think you're right to talk about some of the other, we got to make some assumptions too, right? We got to make some assumptions that this emergency that we're in now will come to an end. Things may be different, but life is going to get back. Tourism dollars are going to come back. Gas tax dollars are going to come up. People moving into Florida, I mean, you're going to have those additional construction costs and things like that. So I think there's some other assumptions there that we can make with good reason. It'd still be pretty conservative.
Anybody else? Thoughts? Chase, you got thoughts?
Yeah, I'll make the comments now. I agree
Yeah,
with
let's do it.
both of those comments that were said. You know, also not typically a wise move to use unbalanced funds for recurring expenses, but exactly what you said, this is what it's there for. I don't believe this is a long-term situation, but I'll tell you, this is one of the reasons why I am always hesitant, even in the good times, to add services and increase our budgets here, because it makes times like these that much more difficult to handle. But I do believe that as the bouncing back will come, that should lighten the load and allow us to recontinue the services and the expenditures that we have and not have to rely on fund balance. I'm okay with that, with exploring that option for the time being. But you know, I think in terms of future projects and future budgets, you know, looking at doing what we need, not so much what we want. You know, I still have a difficult time struggling with with adding transport and our Dunlawton beautification projects. Those are nothing wrong with them, but they're costing us a lot of money. Even with revenue coming in for our transport, it's still a massive cost. as we double up on a service that's already provided. And it just makes these times that much more difficult. So that's why it's difficult for me to look at requests that come in knowing I've got funds that could have been used for these other purposes. But that's just, fundamental, respectful differences of opinions. But that's where I'm at right now. And I would like to see, I was a little disappointed in seeing budgets presented us at the same rate. I thought it was pretty clear that we were looking at a rollback. I would have preferred to have seen each department come at us with a budget based on that directive from council. But I would imagine as we're still early on, we'll be going to that process.
That's why they call this a workshop. Thoughts? Marilyn, you want to chime in?
I've heard several people mention that we shouldn't be looking to change our philosophy on fund balance or our policy. I haven't heard anybody suggest we changing our policy. Our policy is 30%. It's our practice that has been salting more money away. So I want to make it very clear to council and our residents, we need to separate practice, which has been putting us to 37%, when our policy is only 30%. So I would say, why not spend that 7%? We need to do it for things that we shouldn't do it for reoccurring, but certainly that's an appropriate place for certain a la carte and capital. Second thing I would say is, once again, this idea, I don't know that I've heard any good discussion from the manager or staff that has convinced me that not increasing our budget or the tax rate will really represent a detriment to our levels of service. Certainly during COVID, I would be interested. I don't know that our level of service has sunk that much. Certainly we know in the Parks and Rec area it has, because we've had, prohibitions in terms of putting groups together. But I think Public Works and some of the outside functions that city have continued. And I'm not convinced that the levels of service are that much diminished. So I would want council to really look at that, and I would like the manager to justify for everything that is asked for. Tell me in a very concrete way what that means about level of service. Not just that it's going to look prettier, but what does it really mean for every dollar that we're being asked above rollback? The other thing I would say, what expenses, because I think there are some that we have saved during COVID, probably more in the customer-rich environments like Parks and Rec, and I think we need to get back to a full range of service, but that's one of the other things we should think about. And then finally, what I would say is, and this probably relates to level of service to some extent, so some of these roads like Williamson, we don't want we're subsidizing the county. I don't have any problem putting a sign up that says, this is a county road, and putting up another sign that says, adopted by City of Port Orange. Just as you have the Rotary and everybody else adopt places and be responsible, why not take credit for doing something over and above? And in that line, I would also say, maybe we don't need to mow it quite as much, as long as we make it clear that's a county road. Tell the taxpayers, who is ultimately responsible for that. So I will conclude by saying, I want to get as close to rollback as possible. I would say that a 4.3909 millage rate is still a 3.5% increase over rollback. That is another $745,000 of additional revenue from millage. And if you look at the added from new construction, which is 300 and something, that's another $1 million in the budget of the city. I'm not looking for any more of that. I'm not willing to pass it on to our residents. And I love all the department heads. I think you do a great job. I love the city employees, but I really think that there are residents that I hear from that can't afford another increase, and remaining at last year's millage rate doesn't suffice or satisfy the taxpayers, and I'm concerned about that.
Drew, we haven't heard from you.
Well, lots been set up here, and looking at the numbers, and Jake's already let us know at rollback we cannot meet our current obligation. We couldn't pay for the raises that we already owe for. I don't know where the number's going to be or how to get there. You know, that is going to be really tough, but also don't want to look at reducing our service levels. You know, cutting back on mowing or this or that, that's going to show up down the line, and somebody's going to look at it and say, well, our grass has always been spectacular or been nice, and now you're letting it grow and it's knee high and there's trash everywhere, and it looks like, because the less you mow, the more trash gets in there, and now there's going to be additional trash because they kind of pick it up as they're mowing. So now the more it's, you know, when it's in the median, they don't run it over. I see them picking it up as they're going along with the claw and everything. So we're just going to have an appearance factor that affects the city. And as far as going to fund balance, you know, the average number is 30%, but I think the actual thing is it 28 to 35? We have range, 28 to 34 or something like that?
30 to 35.
30 to 35. And when we use that, you know, you've referred to it, and I don't want to we've used the term kicking the can down the road.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to kick a can down the road and then get hit kicking a bigger can the next year. If there's a hurricane, or if the COVID monies, the revenues or the projections are off, now we got a bigger can. And at some point, you know, where's the break-even point? Where do you go if you kick that can down the road too far? So that's my concern, is just kicking down, you know, $2 million in fund balance to get there. Then we still have the $640,000 in a la carte, and looking at all that, if we use fund balance for the capital improvement, we're kicking that can, so to speak. And I want to limit our can kicking where we can.
Well, not necessarily with capital improvement, because those are one-time occurrence dollars.
But all you're going to do
I
is
get you.
the very next year, you know, you get that 5-year capital improvement, and now the numbers shift a little bit. You moved, you saved some in 2022, you move it to 2023. Now 2023's capital goes up. So I just want to limit, you know, we got to be careful in kicking the can is kind of what I'm getting at.
I'm not sure how much we're kicking the can when we put $836,000 from last year into the dollars are there. And I think the challenge is for Jake and his team to take the 5 different opinions that he just heard from us, amalgamate them together, and then come back the next time we get together and see how close we can get. And we still need to evaluate those a la carte items, because we don't have the breakdown of the items yet.
True.
So the question I would have for you is what's next, and when do we get back together on that?
So we will, we'll make sure you have an itemized a la carte list. We'll send that out to you ASAP. And it sounds like you want another workshop prior to the 28th, or you want to nug it all out on the 28th?
because we got a meeting next week.
This council does better under pressure.
Well, I concur.
I think,
Yeah.
and,
We could have a meeting every day and.
Right.
well,
spend
not
5
to
hours
mention
on it.
that gives us 2 weeks to chew on that, and it gives staff 2 weeks to go back and get the combs out and see what else we can do.
Right,
What's that date again?
so,
2 weeks from today.
not something to persuade or dissuade you, but, we talk about millage awful lot without talking about dollars. So, just as a number, the average tax amount for District 1 at at the 4.5254 rate would be just 3 cents under 20 bucks. District 2 would be just under $12. District 3 would go up to $45.50, and District 4 would go up $43.50 per year.
Oh, per year, per resident.
Per year.
Per,
So I understand that getting the millage down as low as possible is important, but to put things into perspective, that any increase is not good. I got that, but for me, when you divide 45 bucks into 12 months, it hurts a little bit less. So something to think about.
I just want to add, because I hear that every year, and, just with respect, Jake, there's countless number of homes right now that have lost hundreds and even thousands of dollars. So the idea of an added dollar, every home is, and it's not directed to you, but every home is making adjustments. Every home is having to make major cutbacks. So the idea of asking for a penny more from residents who have been laid off or had massive pay cuts,
You bet.
no matter how little it is, and those are interesting numbers, that won't make a difference to me in that light, though.
It's just the year. It's the year we're in. I agree with that. Generally speaking, hey, I know that the cost of delivering the service what we pay our employees is not the same as what it was 10 years ago. I pay more for a gallon of milk than what I did 10 years ago. The cost of things go up, and the cost of the services that we deliver on any given year, those costs over time will increase. But what I'm asking is that because of the time we're in and the problems that we have and the challenges that our residents are facing, this is the year we've got to hold the line. We just have to find a way to do it. They need it as much. They need to be able to expect, and whether they understand those dollars, whether it's $4 a month more or no dollars more a month, they need to have the added reassurance that take the pressure off of them, to know that this is not the year we're going to go back to them to solve our financial problems. As far as I'm concerned, enough said. Of all the years that we need to be at rollback, my personal opinion is this is the one. With everything going on, we got to find a way to hold the line. Any other comments on this item? With that, I am going to take a 7-minute recess because we've been sitting in these chairs for 2 hours. And I think it's important that those of us who have a headache talking about the budget have a chance to go take some aspirin first. So we'll be back in 7 minutes. That brings us back to item 5, discussion regarding face masks. We are not the only council that has been going to have this discussion. I do have a lot of fears that because this has been pushed down to us in so many ways to make decisions about what we do in our own communities, I do think it ironic that the state many times wants to tell us how to handle community issues, and here we have larger regional issues, and now all of a sudden home rule is a wonderful thing. But we've been encouraged to make decisions for our own communities, and with that I ask that the discussion be put on the agenda for tonight's workshop. As all of you know, the county, in conjunction with their Step Back, Wash Up, Mask Up program, I issued a proclamation of concern to help emphasize that with our citizens. And our own social media with the city has helped push out the education portion of that, because I do believe that you're going to get a better result when people want to do something as opposed to when they have to do something. But I also feel that, I have to say this for myself. I'm not just looking at this as the mayor of a city who's gotten tons and tons of calls and emails and letters. I'm not looking at it as a person, just as a person who's concerned about the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens. I very much am, but I also want you to know that the father and the husband in me is looking at this as well. My wife works at Halifax. The last thing I want to do is see somebody become ill who is a healthcare worker. I have both sons in college. Both of them work jobs where they come in contact with a great number of people. One of them works in a restaurant, one of them works in a grocery store. And I hear stories of all the time of, hey, Dad, people are reacting this way and people are reacting that way. So you hear the number of people who are acting responsibly, and you hear the number of people who are not. I also understand the argument of, if we do something, is it going to be difficult to enforce? Yeah, absolutely. I understand that the enforcement is an issue. And what we do and how it can or cannot be enforced should come into the equation for the discussion. I get that. But at the same time, this is a health emergency and a pandemic that raises the level of, yes, people want to make decisions for themselves, and while I respect that, most people's decisions to make, it is theirs to make for themselves. When it affects the people around them, then it isn't solely an individual decision anymore. And that's kind of where I stand with that. I would like us to have some sort of mandate, and I would hope that you all would entertain that. If you don't, at the very least, I would certainly like a motion to pass a resolution of support along the lines of the proclamation I issued. I think it is of such great public importance. I'd like to see this council behind it in any way, shape, or form. But I thought I would lead off with my comments and let you guys take it from there. Scott, why don't you take it?
Well,
We'll just go down the line and.
yeah, I'll be a little bit brief, I guess, maybe on my comments. So my concern is that I fully support that everybody should be following CDC guidelines. I think that those, if they're not following them by now, they're never going to follow them, right?
Bingo.
Let's face it, we're 5-6 months into this pretty heavily, and I know that CDC wavered on that. The masks helped and they don't help, and so forth and so on. I get all that. Now I know there's some stuff coming to light as to how are people cleaning the mask. It only helps if the mask is starting off sterile. You don't touch it, you properly clean it, you don't reuse it, blah, blah, and all this different stuff. So My bigger concern is this, and I've seen what a lot of other cities have done. I know New Smyrna passed a mandate with zero enforceability behind it. We as a council struggle with unfunded mandates that get passed down to us from federal and state governments. I struggle with passing down an unenforceable mandate. Who is enforcing these mandates? And the answer is no one. No one is. I've been in these cities that have passed these, and there's nobody enforcing them. Nothing looks different. There was a motion made, something passed, and everything stayed exactly the same. And the reality of it is because there isn't anybody to go out there and enforce that. And that's an issue a concern that I have, is that when you create a mandate and you create a law, you create an ordinance, and you don't have behind it a way to properly enforce it and deal with it, you're just creating more issues. The last thing I want is people bombarding the police department by calling saying, hey, I just saw a guy walk out of the 7-Eleven, he doesn't have a mask on. And now we're dealing with that type of a situation where they already don't have the ability to respond to some of that stuff without taking something else off the plate, so to speak. You know what I mean? So I have a huge issue with that. I'm really concerned with putting something out there as a mandate that really cannot and will not be enforced. And I don't know how you judge that, the person that's walking around without a mask, who is an exemption to the rule and shouldn't be wearing a mask, because those are out there too. And
Absolutely, yeah.
we start approaching people and questioning them about why they don't have a mask on. I really wrestle with that. I mean, I am all for, resolutions of support, encouraging our residents, using social media, encouraging folks to follow the CDC guidelines and follow them when they change, because I get that they're learning too, and they really are. I mean, we've seen that from day one with this whole thing. So, but that's the part I'm struggling with, is putting a mandate out there that's not enforceable, and that there's no nuts and bolts behind it, so to speak, to enforce it and deal with it. How do you deal with that? The other concern I have here in a city like ours, if we're a city like Jacksonville, for example, or Tampa, maybe you look at that geographically and you feel like, okay, we can better do this. But here in Volusia County with 16 municipalities, people don't typically know if they've crossed a line from New Smyrna to Daytona to Port Orange to Daytona Beach Shores to unincorporated county to, all of this kind of stuff. And so those are just some concerns and some
I get
thoughts.
that. That's kind of I wish the county had handled it, so we wouldn't have 16 different directions or 17 different directions.
Well,
But all the same, that's kind of where it's going.
yeah. And I think, geographically speaking, the way our county is laid out, that would be relatively easy to do, right? You got the ocean, you pretty much know when you're getting close to Brevard County, Flagler County, and then you got the St. Johns River. You kind of have a pretty good idea where you're at most of the time in the county. But city to city to city, yeah, that's
Well,
tough
let me
there.
ask you this, since you brought it up. Most of our big box retailers would comply. And most of the risk right now is with the crowds that we have at Walmart, at Publix, at Winn-Dixie, at Target, at Lowe's. We've got a lot of big box retailers in the city. And I also have people saying, well, I won't shop at them in our city because I don't feel safe, so I'm going up to Daytona. Where if you go into Publix, they have the sign up that says you must wear a mask to shop. I mean, so it seems to me we could get better compliance just in the places where there's the most risk. I think we could improve it, improve our situation, at least just by doing that.
You talking about mandating the businesses
If we
to do
if we had a mandate of some sort, the big box stores would comply with it, and those are the places that are where the greatest risk is right now.
I think the employees would comply with it, but you would not have everybody walking in there complying with it. And then you're gonna have,
You probably go from 60% to
you're
95%.
gonna have anger, you're gonna have people arguing and fighting about it, you're gonna have the people that don't have to wear it because of an exemption, being verbally attacked or abused that way. So there are a lot of concerns, and I share the one with Scott, the biggest one. We have zero resources to enforce it.
True.
We have no ability to enforce it. We can't burden the police to try to enforce it. They'd be running around all day and get nothing else done because they'd be chasing, so-and-so isn't wearing a mask. I just saw him, he's going here and there.
But when Scott said nothing would change, I said, well, the one thing that I know would change is that we would get a greater compliance of people doing it when they enter the big box stores where they're at greatest risk anyway.
Well, perhaps, but you're also going to get a expectation from folks that you are actually having an enforcement mechanism to it, and that you're utilizing it, and that you're doing that. I mean, let's face it, the spectrum here from emotions are huge with
Sure,
this whole issue.
absolutely.
Huge. I got an email today from a lady who is wanting us to go to one of the big box stores because she has heard rumor that one of the employees has tested positive, and that the manager of the store will not tell the other employees and won't shut the store down. Well, and wants us as a city to go take action that there is no action for us to take there. There are legal issues there, and you know what I'm saying? So I mean, every time somebody calls in and says, I think that there's a person here who's tested positive and shouldn't be working in the store, the expectation is for the city to go and investigate that and do what with it? Because as far as I know,
Hey, I ain't saying this is perfect.
right, but what I'm saying is we
But
we
we've
know how
never
this-
faced anything like this
I-
before,
I
and we
get
are
it.
talking about the life, health, and safety of our community, which is why I felt like it was better we talk about this in a workshop setting before we decide to take any.
And I think we should. I think we should. Again, my position or my hang-up is my concern is, do we really want to pass a mandate that we can't enforce?
It's a legitimate concern. I think my personal opinion is I think it adds emphasis to it, and if I can get better compliance in the big box retailers, I've moved the needle quite a bit in the riskiest environments, but that's my opinion. Drew, you chimed in a little bit, but you didn't get to finish your thought.
The concern of the lack of resources to fully enforce something, a mandate of this nature is gonna be, very difficult. And then just looking at, not that I'm a numbers cruncher or an expert or anything, but just looking at the report from the health department, I think that Sheriff Chitwood puts out, Volusia, this was from yesterday. I don't think I have today's. Oh no, Tuesday, July 14th. This is yesterday's results, which are today's report. A positivity rate in Volusia we don't have a mandate. Okay, and I don't know where how you break these numbers down, but a positive rate in Volusia County, what are we, 560,000 people, 4,163 results, 8% positivity rate without a mask mandate. Orange County, with a mask mandate about a month ago, it's been over 3 weeks, closer to a month, it's closer to 14%. And the reason you use positivity rate, just looking at it, they do a lot more tests. So you look at the numbers, and that's the only real way to compare it, because we're doing far less tests in Volusia than the bigger counties are. They're bigger counties, they have more people. They were closer to 14%. That number came from last week. I didn't look at that number today. And Seminole County was right about 10%. They also have a mask mandate that came after Orange counties, but not far after. So looking at that, I just don't know what to think. And I'm not saying don't worry. I support some that strongly recommends, but I can't.
But if their mask mandate had come sooner,
well,
would they be where they are?
Yeah, but I'm saying
right now in numbers?
their positivity rate. Orange County's had one for about a month. I think it's 27 days, and their positivity rate the other day was roughly just shy of 14%, I believe.
Mm-hmm. But it was also a very reactionary thing. Oh my goodness, our numbers are spiking. I want to stay ahead of it.
I'm just trying to compare,
I get you.
apples to apples. In order, we don't have one. We don't have the amount of their citizens and people in the county, and we don't have. I mean, you can't really factor the tourism thing into it because all the theme parks were closed. They just really reopened on the 11th or 11th. So, those, now coming down the road, those numbers may be different 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, but I'm just talking just within the past couple of days. Those are real numbers, and I just don't know what to make of that.
It's
But
also
my
hard if
biggest
you-
thing, like I said, I'm not against wearing them. People wear them improperly every single day. I see it every day, people in their car by themselves wearing a mask. I wore them for a long time. You literally have to change that mask every exposure, not leave it on your car mirror and wear it 4, 5, 6 days in a row and then change it. And it's impractical to really change something or clean it you can't spray a mask with Lysol and then breathe through it. Lysol is not good for you to ingest. So I really need to see people wearing them properly. And the way to do it properly is every single exposure is a new mask. Every single exposure. And that could be
Well,
any
that's the
store,
difference.
any
That's the difference
person
between
that
eliminating risk and mitigating risk.
comes in your way or whatever. When you see a mask hanging on somebody's mirror in their car and it's turning brown and they're using it day after day after day, that is not a very good decision. Change them a minimum of 1 a day or more, but you have to change them with every exposure and you don't know where your exposures are coming from. So it's a tough call. I support something saying, hey, we highly recommend, strongly recommend, however you want to do it, that you wear it, but we have no ability to enforce a mandate. That's my concern.
In the business, because the businesses can already do that if they want individually.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they can take
So
that
if
step.
Publix, for example, or whoever, just a big box store that's a corporate, if they want to do that nationwide, they can do that if they want to do that.
A lot of them are looking for us to give them the cover to say, I'm sorry that they're making us do that. You know, a lot
So
of them,
now
they want to be the night.
So now the private company wants government to tell them what to do.
Just
How
like-
about that?
Just like the governments above us have
Yeah,
pushed this decision
right,
down to
right.
us.
Yeah.
They want us to give them the cover. And to me, it's like, give them cover, I don't give them cover. The question is, am I doing what's right for the people who go in there?
Sure.
If they want cover, yeah, okay, maybe it isn't the best position to put us into.
Yeah.
But if people walk out of there safer, I don't know.
And
I don't
I've heard the terminology up here through the years. Smaller government, less, less restrictions and this and that, and smaller government. And here's a big stretch to make a mandate that we can't enforce. That doesn't. That just doesn't make sense to me, and that's why I'm struggling. That's highly recommended, strongly encourage that people follow it, but a mandate is a tough one.
I get it. Chase?
Yeah, I went ahead and written my response out here because there's just so much going on. I am enjoying the dialogue. It's obviously a hot topic, sensitive issue right now. I do want to thank all the calls and text messages and emails I've gotten about this issue over the past couple weeks, which has been an awful lot. I've had more communication from residents on this one issue than anything else since I've been in this chair. Probably just 50 in the last week. I'm sure most of my colleagues here have as well. Many of them in support, and many of them opposed the mandate. So I do understand this to be a very sensitive issue, as we're dealing with something we'd never faced before, as you said, Mayor. I've certainly done my due diligence with this. I wear a mask everywhere I go. Every building I go into, I wear one at my work. So that's a decision that I have personally made. I would not, however, support a mask mandate, and I'll give a few reasons. First of all, I will say at the outset, I don't believe that either side is right or wrong, and I don't believe that those who want a mandate have any intention other than the safety of everyone around them. I believe everyone is very well-meaning in that. I also don't believe that those who do not want a mandate, I don't believe that's an indication that they're not taking the virus seriously or they wish harm on anyone. The negativity on both sides of the issue is not really conducive to the discussion and the debate, not having up here, but that we see around the world today. That being said, I say one of the reasons I do not support it, because as already been mentioned very wisely by the council, is very extremely difficult and I think costly to enforce. I say difficult and costly because anytime you focus your attention on one area, you have to take it from another. Our police officers have much more pressing issues at hand than to stop and ticket those who are not wearing a mask. And if some may say, well, don't enforce it or don't have any punishment, like New Smyrna, I think Scott said it very well. What's the point in having an ordinance? And then let's not have something that you can't enforce. And right now it's a tough time for police, and many groups today, they're considered the enemy of the people. The last thing I want right now is there to be another reason to throw stones at police. Another reason I would say that this is not settled science, regardless of what opinions out there. I've never seen so many disease experts in my life up until the last few weeks on social media. But I'll say that the World Health Organization and the CDC have both flip-flopped on this issue multiple times, even as late as last month, where WHO has changed their opinion. So these are the so-called experts that are getting it wrong or right. I don't feel it's my place to offer medical advice from this chair when the science by the world's best medical experts cannot even agree on it. This is a medical decision that should be decided by individuals. Finally, I do not believe this to be constitutional. Article 1, Section 23 of the Florida Constitution guarantees us the right of privacy. This is some people may not like this, but this is something that we need to consider. It says every natural person has the right to be left alone and free from government intrusion into the person's private life. It's commonly asserted that government's number one job is public safety. As well-meaning as that is, that's not simply true. The number one duty of every elected official is to protect the natural, God-given liberties of every individual. My oath was not made to the people. My oath was made to uphold the Constitution. So I'm not willing to potentially be in violation of the Constitution, particularly on something that is unsettled. These are just a few reasons. I don't even believe I would support a resolution encouraging, as this is again a medical decision to make, and I'm not in a position to offer medical advice. Maybe if it's worded in the sense that this is what the CDC recommends and we support that as a resolution, I may consider that. But again, if they change their mind tomorrow, does that mean we're going to change our resolution? So these are just a few reasons I don't want to support a mandate. But again, I do want to genuinely thank those that did reach out to me and send emails of concern. Even though I share a different position, the comments did not fall on deaf ears. And I'm always willing to listen and dialogue. But that is my position right now.
So, okay, and I'm playing devil's advocate
Sure,
here
fine.
too, as much as anything. What would you say, and this is the biggest concern that I have, is that I like the idea of giving people the choice, but when what you do doesn't just affect you, but affects the people around you, should there be some regulation on that choice? Just like anything else, if you get behind the wheel of a car drunk, your decision affects my life on the road. If you decide not to take this seriously and you don't social distance, you don't wear a mask, and I get sick because of your decision and your actions because of your rights, how do you respond to that?
Well, two things I say. I'd say, first of all, driving a car is not a constitutional right. It's a decision. It's a decision that you get to make. It's a privilege. No one has a constitutional right to do that. My constitutional right is to come and go to a place as I see fit. And secondly, if someone were to say what you do affects me, well, if the mask is that much of a protective piece of equipment, then if that individual person decides to wear a mask, then they should be protected regardless of whether or not I wear one or not.
Except we've been told otherwise. It's an 80-20 thing. I wear this mask because it gives me 20% of the protection, but it protects you from me, the other 80%.
And if
So my wearing a mask does more to protect you than it does to protect me. It's not a 50-50 proposition.
Well, if I've chosen to walk out of my house without a mask and expose myself, that's what I've chosen to do. If I've chosen to walk out of there with a mask and protect myself, that's an individual right to do that.
So I should be able to make the choice to do the things that I need to do. I can go grocery shopping. That's not a choice. I need groceries. I expose myself to other people who don't want to respect my distance and my health.
Well, if you're wearing a mask, then you should be protected, correct?
No, because you're not. The risk to me is 80% if you're not wearing a mask. It's 20% for me with the protection.
So is it 100% protective if I wear a mask and you wear a mask?
We're mitigating the risk, we're not eliminating the risk. Like I said, I'm playing
Yeah,
devil's
no, no,
advocate.
I enjoy
wanna
the
make
debate.
sure we have a vibrant conversation, we flesh this out.
Sure.
I don't
Well,
want
and
any of us walking
No,
away
but-
saying, I wish I had said, or I wish I discussed this.
Sure.
I mean, we're just in trouble with this no matter what we do. It's gonna cut, but you can't even get people to follow simple directions in a grocery store. I try not to go, and every time I've gone since March, when it kind of blew up and got crazy, every single time I've gone, there is somebody going the wrong way on it. Publix announces it. They put it on the ends. They put it on the floor. There are directional arrows, and they are still going the wrong way, and it happens every single time. Every time. And so you can't even get somebody to comply with a simple directional arrow. I don't understand.
Well, and that to me wouldn't be, and that's a good point to make. That wouldn't be a reason not to put it, but again, I would go back to the fact that it is not a settled science. There are medical experts on both sides of the issue that vastly disagree. I would hate to be in a situation where I'm potentially violating somebody's constitutional right on a guess.
It's not a guess.
Well, the data says it's a guess.
No. On that, I'm gonna have to disagree.
That's
But
right.
that's okay, that's why we're having the conversation, right? Marilyn, you wanna chime in?
I think council has
Is that an option?
said everything. I've been thinking, let me just add in terms of, I think Chase did a nice job talking about it's not a settled science, because I've heard that, you've got to spend time with people. It's really about viral load, and if you're just walking down the aisle the other way, it doesn't really necessarily cause a problem. So I think that kicks it into the settled science.
Till they
And
cough or
as for the
sneeze.
fact you've got to go grocery shopping, have your groceries delivered, Mayor, you could avoid. I've known people that have done that. At the end of the day,
My son actually
There-
does it, so. yeah.
there are arguments on both sides, there are valid points, but I think it does come down for me to individual liberty and the role of government. And at this point, I don't believe I can support government making a rule or mandating it.
Okay.
I'd also like to add something that I saw on the news this morning, I believe it was, or was it yesterday morning? DeLand, with the mask mandate, is now being sued for that mask mandate, and they alluded to more lawsuits are coming against cities with mask mandates.
Well,
And I get it, anybody can sue anybody whenever, but
I'm
an
gonna-
attorney has
Sure.
filed a lawsuit against the city of DeLand as of, I believe it was this morning.
And that doesn't surprise me, we know that's coming, but let's also take a look at the numbers in West Volusia. In smaller cities in West Volusia are tons greater than our East Volusia cities. I think part of it is because you got a lot of Orlando workforce that live in those cities.
Perhaps.
DeLand and Deltona, their numbers are tremendously higher than ours here in Port Orange.
Well, let me ask this.
But that lawsuit is
At-
gonna cost taxpayer dollars.
Well, at what point do we draw the line as well? Because CDC also recommends you wash your hands. CDC also recommends you socially distance. Are we going to put a mandate in that you wash your hands? Good God, everybody needs to wash their hands. Are we gonna put a mandate in there for that? We should be social distancing. Are we gonna put a ticket because people are standing too close to each other? So we're picking one over the other, so.
Give them all big 6-foot donuts,
The-
3-foot donuts.
I
Yeah,
understand.
inner tube, but big.
You got to mandate that everybody get the shot when that comes out?
Heck, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Right.
Well,
Well,
let's hear
but I
from, we
agree
got a lot of
that-
public, let's hear from
I
them.
also think Drew made an excellent point that ties in with Chase's about scientific evidence when he said there are jurisdictions or cities nearby, neighboring, that have made mask mandates, and yet they have higher COVID numbers than we do.
Yeah.
Certainly that may relate to density, but we don't
Yeah.
know all of that, and there is no clear correlation in all of the data. It goes different ways, it
Yeah.
goes every which way, and so at the end of the day, without a clear evidence, I am uncomfortable with government making a rule. And we've also talked about the problem with enforcement, so.
I get it. And of course, I think it's important we have the conversation, because we're not just talking about an event that's going on, we're talking about people's lives.
Well, and I appreciate the devil's advocate, because it goes to demonstrate they're not easy questions to answer. It's not a cut and dry issue. I get that.
Well, before we kick it to the public, I was going to say, I still favor us doing something, but it appears right now that I am the only one, but that's okay. Let's see if anybody from the public can change their mind. I'm going to start with Noreen Seone, Seoane, wrote in. Mandatory mask in our stores. Daytona Beach, New Smyrna citizens are coming to our grocery stores without wearing masks, since both cities have mandated masks. A lot of people from Daytona and New Smyrna Beach have been fleeing into our city to shop without any protection covering their mouth. I ask that city council members will vote for the protection and well-being of citizens of Port Orange. That is the written responses. Why don't,
There's no
Shelby,
way
are
to
we ready to go to
prove that.
Robert Reinhagen? Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead, Robert, you're up.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, council members, Robert Reinhagen, 1425 Dexter Drive, North. As I understand the situation, face coverings reduce the ability of the wearer from spreading any virus. The face covering is not very effective in protecting the wearer from any virus that may be coming from an uncovered person. Current science also indicates that people can be expelling the virus while showing no symptoms of the disease themselves. And virus droplets can even be suspended in the air for a period of time after the uncovered person moves through. Florida has a stand your ground statute that places the burden of responsibility to prevent violence on the aggressor, who presents an immediate threat to another person's life. For the elderly and under the concept of individual liberty, those who feel susceptible to infection should just stay away. But for the elderly and those with underlying health problems, staying at home and being afraid to shop for food and supplies is essentially retreating, which they are not required to do under Stand Your Ground. We also need to recognize that businesses and organizations have the right to refuse entry to potential transmitters of a deadly virus to their employees and customers. The city needs to authorize the police, when requested by the business or organization, to trespass any person who refuses after being requested to wear a face covering and still enters the establishment. The threat is just too immediate not to support enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Got the next one up? Sarah, are you there?
She's muted.
Hold on, Sarah, she's trying to unmute you. Sarah, I believe you're muted on your end if you'd like to speak.
She still has
She's
to,
still-
she's still muted.
Your microphone is muted. Your camera's on, but there we go.
Okay, now we're better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I said in my application that I just wanted to listen. I didn't want to talk.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh,
And would anyone here care to speak to the
We
item?
still have one more field? Or, oh, no, that's Shelby.
That's Shelby.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Come on up, Jim.
You know, this is really a conundrum because I'm not so sure the place of city government to enforce something like that. You don't want to be there. What we want is people to protect themselves as best they can. The reality is a lot of things are being ignored that would give them a huge advantage. Like simply they could take a good sized dose of vitamin D and get their level up to where they're making antimicrobial peptides, which are nature's antibiotics, especially for your lungs and all your other organs too. There's over 200 different of these natural antibiotics if you get your level up to sufficient. Most people are insufficient or deficient. You know, so if people aren't doing what's required for themselves, should we coerce government into forcing somebody to do something? And what Drew mentioned was really cogent too. The fact that most people carry that mask around and use it repeatedly or incorrectly. And so what you're doing is you're taking a culture dish of all of the viruses and bacteria that you've been exposed to and saving it to take it home. You can't get more stupid. But we wish to legislate that so that you will. You know, and I sent you an email, which was an article by a Nobel laureate. Well, anyways, he got in chemistry, and he's a modeler. And what he showed that what we're really doing is we're off in the weeds looking at things that don't make any difference and not looking at the big stuff that we should be looking at. So what he was saying is that like New York is doing great now and Florida is doing terrible, but New York originally was putting their old people into nursing homes, often when they were contaminated with COVID, and killed them by the hundreds, just brutally misjudging reality and doing something really stupid. And the fact that the government was rewarding them with ventilator fees might have had some issue there. But what we should do is take personal responsibility, stay healthy, and do the best you can, and maybe not have government push us.
Do me a favor, Jim, just give your name for the record.
Oh, Jim Schultz, 117 Harvard Drive.
Thank
My
you.
apologies on that.
Thanks.
No worries. You know the drill. Who's next?
I think we got one more, John.
Yep.
Hi, I'm John Barrington, 810 Woodport Drive, and I'm in favor of the mask. I mean, I've watched news and see these numbers just keep going up and up and up, and you look at other countries that have done better than our country, and a lot of those countries have forced the mask and they had to stay at home orders and everything. I think just watching what others have done and the results they've got from it, and looking at what we've done and the results we've got, we're one of the worst. I mean, we're having the biggest problem of any country. A lot of these countries, Italy, who at the beginning, and they probably have hardly anything, but they did a lockdown. People wear masks, they took it serious. In this country, a lot of people just don't seem to take it serious. And I think the mask, even if it was just in the stores where you're confined, when you're walking out on the street and you're away from people, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But when you're in these stores, you can't help it for somebody to walk by you and all that. And if it was enforced just in the stores, that would be a huge step. Nobody says you have to wear one when you're out in the boat fishing. I mean, It's just, when you're around people, you need to do something to keep the spread down. I think mask is a good idea. It sure can't hurt.
Thanks, John.
Your opinion. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
John.
Okay. I think that's everybody. Jake?
Yes, sir. Mayor, just to prevent a couple folks from coming up, number one, I think Robert brings up a good point, and I think you already know, but I'd like the public to know that the police can already trespass somebody for not doing something that a private business asks them, right? No shirt, no shoes.
No service.
In this case, if they want, no mask, no service. And if the owner of a business says, you know, you want to come in Walmart or whatever business, my State Farm agency, you got to wear a mask, and they go, no, I have rights. Equally, that business owner has rights, and he can say, well, that's great, you're not coming in here, and if they fail to comply, they can call the police. So I just want to make that clear. And I think you're familiar with the policy in the city as well. So in City Hall, if we can't social distance, we'll mask up. And last but not least, you all will all have plexiglass dividers betwixt you probably for the next meeting. So that will be an additional mitigation. Bottom line, Matt and I want to come up and hang out with you again. So we're gonna put you back together, and Matt and I are gonna come
Does
up.
this have
and
to be a clear one? 'Cause
sit up there. Well, so we're gonna give you all little stickers. You can do whatever you want with your
Stickers.
section.
Can we use them like dry erase boards?
Sure, absolutely. That's all I have.
Let me ask council this. Would you consider a resolution of support?
I don't have as, well, first of all, I just want to comment, and I appreciate Jay.
A
bringing that up,
resolution of
'cause-
encouragement, I should
Yeah.
say.
I wanted to comment real quick. I appreciate Jay bringing it up, because I did want to just reiterate to Robert's comment that businesses that want to have a mandatory mask policy can do that. I think it's important that that's clear. So if the public's expectation is that I have to force a business to do that in order for the business to do that, that is wrong. If a business, whether it's big box, mom and pop, they want to do it, they can do it. They can also prohibit folks from coming in without a mask, and the police department has the legal process to deal with that if that is what a business chooses to do. So I think that's important, because that is another issue that I've heard in just casual discussion as this has evolved over the months, that people don't think businesses can do that. They absolutely can do that. So in terms of a resolution, you know, if it's us encouraging residents to follow current CDC guidelines, because at the end of the day, as an individual, I think we all to some degree have to pick who is it that I want to entrust to help me understand what I should do to best benefit myself and my family, right? And so in this situation, you're either looking at what, the WHO, or you're looking at CDC, right? Or maybe your State Department of Health. So I'm not opposed to considering a resolution that encourages folks to follow those guidelines, but in so much as what we've already talked about, is that even really necessary? Because again, that's, what is that, feel good piece of paper? I mean,
If we can encourage people.
Are
and
we going to
move the
encourage
need-
more than every news network that follows this 24/7?
Yeah, it's
We
on the
can
news
encourage
every
even a
day.
handful more people to bring awareness. Do we accomplish something with our time? I don't know. You tell me. Think
Got a
about it.
Member of the public probably have to come up again, right?
Yeah.
You want to hear from them again? Because we've gone through that. I mean, if you all want, it's a
Okay.
workshop, I don't have a problem with it.
Always
I'm
willing
okay
to
with
hear
you
from
coming up.
He
yeah.
did not use up all his time. Come on up, John.
My only question is if some of you feel that it's not so important to wear a mask, why is it important to have dividers put up at the expense of the city for you all to be protected?
Touche. Chief?
Tom Grimaldi, Chief of Police. I wasn't going to come up and discuss this, but as I listen, and everybody's making some good points, I think it goes back to beginning what Councilman Stiltner, Councilman Bastian, some of the others have said. Enforcement is an issue. I'm telling you, from the police department, it's an issue. And I have a serious concern with this. Not only the environment we're in now, overall, not only COVID, but everything else that's going on in the world. It puts us as a police department in a very bad position. It puts our city, in my opinion, in a very bad position. And I think to do so, quite frankly, would be irresponsible. I think the enforcement part of it, again, I don't want to throw stones at our neighbors. I think when you make a mandate with no enforcement, quite frankly, it's ridiculous. I think it puts us in a bad position, and quite frankly, the added tasks, I don't know where we're going to get that from. We're understaffed already. We're running around taxed to the limit now. And to add this, and let me remind you that this will, and mark my words, this will turn into something else. Because somebody here had mentioned about the people that are not wearing it will continue to not wear it, and will continue to be adversarial. And when they get adversarial, now we go into a whole nother arena, and it becomes a crime. And then my officers have to go hands-on, and then we have to use force. And that turns into a colossal mess. And then at the end of the day, even if nobody gets hurt, we're bringing someone to jail, yes, for a resisting charge, but it started because he or she wasn't wearing a mask. I urge you not to make this a mandate.
I'll be honest, Chief, same thought went in my head. I work in the city of Daytona Beach limits, and I wear a mask everywhere I go. And as soon as I heard there was a mask mandate, now you're telling me to wear one, my instinct was, all right, I'm going to go to the store without a mask, just because that's my right to do so. Now, I didn't. I wouldn't have done that, but, cooler head would prevail naturally. But some might not have cooler heads.
Yeah, and good example. And I choose to wear one. That's my personal choice. I choose to wear one. I will tell you that this past weekend I was out in both Daytona Beach and New Smyrna Beach, and I was in some of the big box stores, and people aren't wearing them. 1 in 3 people are wearing them, but so you got a third of them not wearing them. And I just don't think having a mandate on that is going to change things at this point, unfortunately. Do I wish everybody would wear one to make everybody feel comfortable? Yeah, but we don't live in utopia. So that was my point, and I just wanted to bring that up before you make your decisions.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Well, what I would say with that is that, and this is the other piece, people are focusing on masks instead of all the CDC guidelines. And in some people's mind, they're trying to keep that social distance, not get close to you. So that's another reason some people aren't wearing them, aside from, they're in one of the exceptions. So I have no problem if we decide to do a statement as a council, but I would never restrict it solely to masks. People need to be paying attention to everything that the
Program is
CDC
mask
is
up,
saying.
back up,
Like,
wash up.
if you don't feel well, stay home. Wash your hands, social
Yeah.
distance if you're outside. Probably the citizens are looking at us and saying, well, none of you except Scott's wearing a mask. The truth is, I have one. I put it on when I come in and out because I know I'm passing by people. But once I'm up here, there's enough distance.
Yeah.
So I'm using that, guideline, and I think a lot of council is. The chief is, we don't need to make police job more difficult. And citizens need to understand they need to take individual responsibility.
And the idea is, and I'm hoping, even though this conversation didn't go the way I wanted to, I'm hoping just simply by having the conversation, it brings a little bit more awareness of the seriousness of it, that what I do impacts your life. The choices individuals make don't just affect themselves, but they affect the people around them. And if it helps to make everybody stop, and take stock in that and just think about that just a little bit. And it helps everybody, not just from a health standpoint, but just from a human standpoint, to be a little bit more respectful of each other. That's the town and city we live in. Those are the people who live here. I don't, and if we stop and take and think about that just for a second, I've got to believe that the people who have good hearts who live here now, just by giving it a second thought, well, hey, yeah, that's true. I want to do this for the people around me. I want to do this for my community. We don't know what we don't know, and that's why we're asking people to take precautions. And with that, is there any other comments on this item?
I'd just like to thank everybody for their candid remarks and comments, the members of the public and whoever, John and those here, and Jim and Chief Grimaldi as well for speaking up. So I thank you all for the comments. I appreciate it.
I absolutely appreciate honesty from all of you, and I do take stock in the fact that we can talk about things, and none of us feels like we have to measure our words with each other.
Well, I think the thing that also might close this out is, if circumstances change, we can revisit this if
True.
we feel there's something else we need to do.
Which is why I thought it was important that we have this conversation before, not attached to any piece of action, but rather deciding what a course of action should be. I agree, Marilyn. Thank you. Anything else come before us this evening? Everybody have a good night, stay safe, and stay healthy.